Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Was Sent to Kill Bakugou? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. The night split open with gunfire. Tires screamed against wet asphalt as unmarked cruisers skidded into the alley. Floodlights flared, cutting through the darkness like knives. The piedi, move a TV. He's on foot, move. Izuku was already gone. His boots slammed against the pavement, every stride calculated, every breath measured. He vaulted a fire escape like it was second nature, pulling himself up with the ease of muscle memory and adrenaline. Rain slicked the rusted metal, but he didn't slip. He never slipped. Above, a chopper swept the rooftops, its spotlight hunting him like a predator. Izuku dove through a shattered skylight just before the beam pinned his shadow to the wall. Glass shattered. He rolled through the landing, came up in a crouch, and kept moving. They were fast tonight, more coordinated. Someone tipped them off. Zona 3. Isolatila este sanguinando. Zone 3. Lock it down, he's bleeding. Izuku glanced at the crimson streak on his forearm, teeth clenched. A graze, nothing fatal. But they'd use it to track him. He pulled a smoke pellet from his belt and dropped it behind him. Thick gray fog burst out in seconds, masking his trail as he disappeared into the maze of gutted hallways. Adrenaline surged through him, stopping wasn't an option. Oh, scratch that. He knew he couldn't stop. Not now. All he could think was the same exact words over and over again. Who could give the police a tip? He was said, outraged even. When the sirens finally vanished, he let himself stop. Slumped against a damp wall, he dragged in shaky breaths, lungs burning. Curses could be heard from the man. He's never let the authorities get this close to catching him. Which is why he's this angry. No police officer, no living human would be able to track him that easily, to catch him off guard like that. It's embarrassing, honestly. He pulled out his phone, calling the only person he could ever trust in this shitty world that he has to live in. Tashinori. The sound of the phone ringing was somehow obnoxious, like it was mocking him. God FNG, damn it, Tashinori, answer the phone. Please. Izuku was begging. He never did that. Izuku? Hello, what is wrong? Are you okay? It's 3 o'clock in the morning. The professional, calculated Izuku vanished the very moment he heard Tashinori's voice. He even let out a sigh of relief, one that he didn't even realize he was holding. Tashinori, someone gave the police a tip and they almost caught me. I got away, thank God. But I don't know what to do. The authorities are on my butt, and I'm currently in some dark alleyway. Why was he scared? He's experienced, he should know what to do. Figured. Don't freak out, alright? I have your location, I'll come get you. We can figure it out in the morning. He took a deep breath. Okay, thanks. Izuku hung up, his hands dropping limply to his legs, the weight of defeat sinking in. As the adrenaline faded, the sharp sting from the graze on his forearm cut through the fog of his mind. He winced, fingers brushing the wound, and for a moment he couldn't tell if it was the pain or the exhaustion that had him shaking. He couldn't understand why he was acting like this. He'd survived worse, far worse, than anything these police could throw at him. So why did the sight of a few lousy officers chasing him have him feeling like this? Miserable, weak, like he was falling apart at the seams. It didn't make sense. Maybe it was because he'd never come this close to being caught before. He never let himself slip, not in missions like these. Hell, he didn't make mistakes, PRD. He couldn't afford to. Call him inhumane, if you wanted, he was used to it. The saying, everyone makes mistakes, was a luxury for the lazy, the ones with 9 to 5 jobs, the ones who had the privilege of screwing up and still having a life to go back to. Not him. He was something else entirely. Mistakes were for the FNG weak. Which is what made barely getting away feel like such a gut punch, like no matter how far he'd come, he was still that same inexperienced kid from years ago. Those 10 to 15 minutes waiting for Tashinori felt like an entire lifetime for Izuku. When he finally did show up, Izuku wasted no time getting in that car. He could feel Toshinori's eyes on him, heavy with worry, but he didn't have the strength to meet his gaze. Then, he heard a sigh come from Toshinori, right before he began to drive back home. Toshinori really cared about Izuku. But he knew well enough to not to pressure him or step into his boundaries. So, when Izuku was purposely avoiding eye contact with him, he knew that all Izuku wanted to do was sleep, not have a whole venting session. As soon as they made it back to the hotel, Izuku collapsed onto the nearest bed without a word, falling asleep. Izuku woke up feeling shitty. His body ached, and the weight of everything that had happened pressed heavy on his chest. As his eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light, he saw Toshinori sitting nearby, watching him quietly, like he'd been there the whole time, just waiting for him to open his eyes. Toshinori! Izuku let out a short, awkward laugh, not liking that the man was just sitting there, coincidentally waiting for him to wake up. Young Midoriya. I didn't want to burst your bubble the other night by asking what exactly happened back there. But you seemed pretty shaken. I don't think I've seen you be in a state like that since your first few missions. I knew you had potential from the start, and obviously I was right. He stopped for a moment, like he was searching for the right words, carefully turning them over in his mind before finally speaking. Would you mind telling me what's wrong? He asked at last, the words leaving him on a quiet breath, like he'd been holding them in for too long. Izuku sighed, rubbing his eyes. It's stupid, nothing for you to really ponder about, but if you're worrying this much about me. That I just felt defeated, or something like that. I barely got out of there, I could have been arrested. It all felt so unreal. He looked into Toshinori's eyes, searching for guidance, some unspoken answer to ease the weight in his chest. But all he found was that same familiar look, quiet, steady, and filled with worry. He knew Toshinori couldn't just understand what he's feeling or saying by just saying a couple of words. So, he took a deep breath, continuing on. I know that someone gave them a tip, that's obvious, but that whole situation just made me feel like the same inexperienced loser that I was years ago. Izuku bit the inside of his cheeks as he awaited his mentor's response. It's normal to feel that way. I felt that way at some point as well, and there's nothing you can really do about it but think of how far you've come. I know you well, Izuku, you're probably not going to listen to me, but just trust me when I say this. You are a very skillful, intelligent, and strong person. You aren't that same kid that's scared to pick up a knife. You almost got caught, so what? You shouldn't hold yourself back because of this. With every word from Toshinori, the heavy burden that clung to Izuku began to lighten, fading into the background. Eventually, a genuine smile was seen on the freckled boy's face, which made Toshinori feel complete. Till he heard the words, "Don't forget, we are on a mission. You still have work to do." Izuku had completely forgotten that he was supposed to kill some gang member. Actually, he wasn't some gang member. It was Katsuki Bakugou. Word is that feisty blonde is here with some of his gang on a mission. Izuku already knew that he was a beach. He's never met him in person, but word goes around in the streets, and before he knew it, hating him became second nature. Izuku is lucky that he wasn't affiliated with some gang, he just works with Toshinori. He's the one who's infamous, who has connections, a man of authority, with a vast network of influence, skilled in both leadership and strategy. But no one knew who Izuku was, especially not when he worked under the cover of night. That was the point. He was that fing good. Yeah, sure, Izuku knew about the rumors. The headlines. The theories. The way people spoke in hushed voices about the vigilante who struck under moonlight and vanished before the blood hit the ground. But that's all they had, rumors. No name. No face. Just fragments of sightings, blurry footage, and bodies that told stories no one could prove. To the world, he was an urban legend stitched together by fear and desperation. And he liked it that way. Which is why Toshinori assigned him to kill Katsuki. Izuku snapped out of his thoughts, realizing Toshinori was looking at him, waiting for a response. Thanks. Toshinori. I won't let you down. Izuku finally responded, his voice quiet, and it wasn't long before he pushed himself up from the bed. He could feel his mentor's gaze following him as he made his way into the bathroom. He stared at his reflection in the mirror and let out a quiet sigh. His hair, wild and unruly as ever, was starting to get a little too long, curling at the edges in defiance. Maybe it was time for a haircut. Izuku went through his usual morning routine, brushing his teeth, washing his face, the usual drill. Afterward, he threw on a navy blue hoodie and a pair of light-wash jeans, keeping things simple and comfortable. He didn't need to worry about keeping his identity under wraps, not during the day. In the eyes of the average passerby, he was just another face in the crowd, a casual citizen blending into the rhythm of city life. Later, Toshinori. Izuku called out over his shoulder, voice light as he grabbed his keys. With that, he stepped out the door, intent on finally getting that overdue haircut. His first stop was the small cafe just down the street from the motel he and Toshinori were staying at. During his time here in Italy, it had become something of a ritual, swinging by the cozy little place for a lot. It was quiet, tucked away from the city's buzz, and the coffee? Always worth it. So really, why not? As he pushed open the cafe door, the bell above chimed softly, right before he collided with someone coming out. Izuku took a small step back, startled by the sudden impact. The man in front of him was tall, taller than him by several inches, and had a muscular build that made the collision feel like hitting a wall. His presence was sharp, almost intense, with messy ash-blonde hair and a piercing scowl that seemed permanently etched into his face. Izuku's heart skipped, caught somewhere between disbelief and something more complicated. It was him. The one and only Katsuki Bakugou. "Dums," he muttered sharply, cutting Izuku off before he could get a single word out, let alone an apology. He moved to shoulder past him, already turning away, but Izuku reached out and grabbed his arm on impulse, stopping him mid-step. Bakugou froze. Slowly, he turned back, eyes narrowing as he leveled Izuku with a look that could have burned through concrete. His expression was sharp, unwelcoming, like a warning. "The hell do you think you're doing?" he snapped, voice low and edged. Izuku's hand dropped, but he didn't look away. His heart pounded in his chest, loud enough to hear. "I'm so sorry, I'm sorry." The words tumbled out of Izuku before he could stop them, rushed and uncertain. He didn't know what to say to him, that look he had. It quite literally made him want to sheet his pants. I didn't mean to grab you, sorry for that." He was so embarrassed. Why couldn't he make eye contact with him? What was he doing? Then, out of all things Katsuki could have done, he laughed. He laughed. He didn't walk away, he didn't curse him out. He laughed. "What the f***? If you think I'm hot, you can just go out there and say it already. What a nervous wreck you are." Izuku gasped at this. Who the hell does he think he is? Sure, he is one handsome F, but what the hell? Okay, you know what, I was trying to be nice, and am glad you know you're one handsome motherfucker, but with that attitude, no one's gonna want you. Maybe some desperate girl will come along, eager for a one-night fling with you. But a real, lasting commitment? That's never going to happen. Be you cocky son of a bitch and have a great day. He watched as Katsuki's jaw dropped further with each insult, a twisted satisfaction stirring within him. Without a second glance, he turned and walked into the cafe, leaving the silence to hang in the air. When he finally sensed it was safe to exhale, he let out the breath he'd been holding. Izuku might have screwed up just a little bit. Actually, he effed up big time. He was supposed to kill this guy. He was supposed to lure him in, create a healthy friendship with him, and then murder him. But no, Izuku went all out on him and probably hurt his ego. He sighed again, only to realize he was next in line to order. "Sir? Hello?" The cashier's tentative voice made Izuku's face burn with embarrassment. "Sorry, I spaced out for a second. Could I get an iced latte, please?" He watched as she tapped his order into the iPad. Before she could even ask, cash or credit, he was already handing her a $10 bill. She took the bill and moments later, returned his change. As he waited for his drink, Izuku couldn't stop replaying the moment in his head, over and over again. What was he thinking? How could he have been so stupid? He humbled Katsuki real good, obviously, but how is he going to be able to get close with him after this? Izuku pushed his thoughts aside as his iced latte was set down on the pickup counter. He walked over, grabbed it, and took a long sip, the chill instantly calming his nerves. Sweet, smooth, and just strong enough to pull him back into focus. He exhaled through his nose, more centered now. Finally, he could get on with the rest of his day, and actually go get that haircut. You know, the entire reason he stepped out of the motel in the first place. He stepped into the barber shop, the soft chime of the doorbell announcing his arrival. A few barbers glanced up briefly before returning to their work except for one. A guy with vivid, spiky crimson-red hair approached him with an easy grin and friendly energy that filled the room. "Hey man, don't think I've seen you around here before," he said, voice upbeat. "You new in town?" Izuku was caught off guard. The guy didn't look or sound Italian at all. Yeah, I am," Izuku replied, offering a nervous smile. The red-haired barber grinned and motioned toward one of the open chairs. "Come on, I've got you covered." Izuku sat down as the barber grabbed one of the black salon capes and snapped it open with a practiced flick, draping it around his shoulders and securing it gently at the neck. So, the guy began, spinning slightly to grab a comb and some clippers. "What are we thinking today? Trim? Buzz? Maybe some color?" He smiled brightly, clearly the type who enjoyed making people feel welcome. But Izuku stiffened at the word buzz, his eyes widening just a little at the mental image. Buzz it? The idea alone was enough to make his stomach drop. "Just a trim," he said quickly, managing a small, polite smile. He chuckled, clearly catching the panic in Izuku's voice. "No worries, man. We'll keep it simple. Clean you up, not change your identity." Izuku let out a small breath of relief, slumping slightly in the chair as the barber ran a comb through his messy green curls, tugging gently to separate the strands. "Dimin," the redhead said with a laugh. "Your hair's got a mind of its own. How long's it been since your last cut?" Izuku flushed a little. "A while." "Thought so." The guy grinned, spritzing his hair with water from a spray bottle before grabbing a pair of shears. "Don't worry, I've dealt with worse." He worked with a steady hand, snipping away the uneven ends, combing and trimming in quick, confident motions. Hair started to fall in small tufts to the floor, light and green. The air filled with the soft rhythm of scissors and the occasional mist from the spray bottle. Izuku sat quietly, occasionally glancing at his reflection. Bit by bit, the chaotic fluff he'd been dragging around started to take shape, cleaner, neater, still his hair, just better. "So," the barber said after a moment, casually, "what brings you to this part of Italy? Business? Vacation?" Izuku hesitated, then gave a non-committal shrug. "Something like that." "Something like that?" The barber didn't push, just smiled through the mirror. "Well, wherever you're from, you've got good taste in coffee, and now a solid haircut to match." Izuku chuckled under his breath. "Thanks." "No problem." "I totally forgot." The barber laughed, lightly smacking his forehead. "Name's Kirishima. Man, how dumb is that? I didn't even introduce myself properly." Kirishima. Izuku blinked. That name sounded oddly familiar, but before he could place it, Kirishima was already giving the last few snips, cleaning up the edges with practiced ease. "There we go," he said, brushing the loose strands from Izuku's neck and shoulders before unclipping the cape with a quick flick. "All set." Izuku stood, smoothing his hoodie as he glanced at his reflection again. "Nice to meet you, Kirishima." "I'm Izuku," he said at last, offering a small but genuine smile. Kirishima's grin widened. "Right on. Nice to meet you too, Izuku. You're all done, dude, looking fresh." Izuku stood up from the chair, brushing off the last of the loose hair from his sleeves as he reached into his pocket for his wallet. "How much?" he asked, glancing up at Kirishima. $15, the redhead replied with a cheerful grin, already beginning to tidy up his station. Izuku pulled out a 10 and a 5, smoothing them out before handing them over. "Here you go." Kirishima took the bills with a grateful nod. "Thanks, man." "Have a good day, Kirishima." "And, thanks again." "For the cut." Izuku gave a small, appreciative smile, genuine this time. "Anytime," Kirishima said, returning the smile with one of his own, wide and full of that same easy energy. Come by again if you're ever in the area. I've got your back, Izuku. Izuku lingered for a brief moment before turning toward the door, the faint jingle of the bell sounding again as he stepped back out into the sunlit street, hair lighter, thoughts heavier, and the name Kirishima still echoing quietly in the back of his mind. The name was right there, on the tip of his tongue, yet Izuku couldn't quite place where he's heard that name before. Kirishima watched as the freckled guy stepped out of the barber shop, his eyes following him through the glass doors. Once he was out of sight, Kirishima reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, quickly dialing the only feisty blonde he knew. Hey man, I got the name of your guy. It's Izuku. In fact, just finished cutting him, nailed it. Kirishima grinned, his voice upbeat. On the other end of the line, Katsuki's low chuckle echoed through the phone before he replied, Good. Appreciate it. Then, the line went silent as Katsuki hung up, the faint click of the call ending echoing in Kirishima's ear. Kirishima couldn't quite figure out why Katsuki needed information about Izuku, but one thing was clear, poor guy had no idea what he'd just walked into. He knew Katsuki well, and he knew him well enough that if anyone even dared to scratch the surface of that ego, he'd ruin their lives. Of course, Kirishima wasn't just some casual barber in Italy, he was here with Katsuki and the rest of the crew. This was more of a side gig he'd picked up for fun, a way to pass the time, while staying out of trouble. Izuku had definitely seemed suspicious. Most customers Kirishima had cut for were more than happy to chatter about their day, why they were in Italy, where they'd been, all sorts of little details. People weren't shy about sharing, especially in a place like this. But when Kirishima had asked, What brings you to this part of Italy? Izuku had hesitated, like he'd been caught off guard, his expression shifting to something guarded. Sure, Katsuki was offended by something he said or did, but Kirishima needs to do some digging. Izuku was pretty sure he wasn't coming back to that barber shop anytime soon. He could almost feel the weight of the redhead's gaze on him as he walked out, a sharp, unspoken attention that lingered even after he was gone. And Kirishima, the name stuck with him, but not in the way it should have. Normally, Izuku had a knack for remembering names, but this one? Close enough to almost feel, but just out of reach. He decided to dig a bit into his name once he was home, and well, he definitely did recognize it. Kirishima works with Katsuki. He works with Katsuki, and got his hair cut by him. How the hell did he forget that he is quite literally affiliated with that son of a beach? Well, all he could do now is to never step foot in that barber shop again. The clock struck 12 a.m., signaling the start of Izuku's nightly stroll through Italy. He hated to admit it, but Izuku was definitely a night owl. Sleep never came easily to him, not until the crack of dawn, when the world was just starting to wake up. Izuku stared at his reflection in the mirror, his eyes scanning his figure. He was dressed in his usual all-black outfit, the dark fabric almost blending into the shadows. The hoodie pulled up over his head gave him an added layer of concealment. It was perfect for his nightly strolls, undetected, blending seamlessly into the darkness. Or, in other words, his illegal nightly walk. Izuku wasn't proud of it, but it was a routine he couldn't seem to shake. He stepped out of the motel, the cool night air hitting him like a welcome embrace. The scent of Italy, of cobblestones, fresh pastries from nearby bakeries, and the distant hum of the city filled his lungs. It was always quieter at this hour, the world still and waiting for the sunrise that Izuku would never see. But as the cool night air wrapped around him, it also reminded him of last night, when things had nearly gone sideways. He'd almost been caught by the authorities. The memory was still fresh, the roar of a helicopter slicing through the air above him, the flashing lights of cop cars in pursuit, and the steady crunch of boots hitting the pavement as officers chased him on foot. He'd led them on a wild chase, darting through alleys, above buildings, and down narrow streets, keeping them on his tail for longer than he'd ever dared. It had been a close call. Yet, despite the close call, Izuku still felt that same rush, the thrill, the surge of adrenaline that pulsed through him like a drag. The danger, the risk, the chase, it all exhilarated him. Even if it meant getting into trouble, he'd do it all over again without hesitation. It was the thrill he yearned for, the feeling that made him feel alive in a way nothing else could. The consequences didn't matter, It was the chase that kept him coming back for more. So, without a second thought, he got started with his nightly stroll that's definitely illegal. Izuku's every move was fluid, almost instinctual, honed by years of practice. He melted into the shadows, his body in perfect sync with the city around him. The thrill surged through him as he jumped from one rooftop to the next, barely a whisper of sound escaping. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, just pure focus. He reached the edge of the building and without breaking his stride, launched himself into the air, his hands gripping the ledge of the next structure with expert precision. His fingers dug into the rough stone as he pulled himself up in one smooth motion, muscles working in perfect unison. It wasn't a climb, it was a dance, a performance of skill and timing. Izuku had memorized every inch of this urban jungle during the few weeks he's been here, the weak points in the walls, the best spots to land, the angles that gave him the most leverage. It wasn't just about getting from one place to another. It was about owning every inch, feeling every surface beneath his hands and feet. The rush of jumping across gaps, scaling walls, and climbing structures that weren't meant to be climbed, it was second nature to him. When he leaped across a narrow alley to another building, he tucked his knees midair, twisting just enough to land on the edge of the next roof. His feet met the surface with the softest thud, the kind only someone who had mastered the art of silent movement could achieve. He wasn't just running, he was flowing. No obstacles could stop him. The night was his canvas, and the city his playground. Time seemed to slip through his fingers, each leap and climb blurring together until, before he knew it, the clock read 2 a.m. Izuku paused, his chest heaving as the cool night air filled his lungs. His muscles ached, his body finally starting to protest against the hours of constant movement. He was out of breath, the exhaustion was creeping in. He made his way to the edge of the building, his eyes scanning the sprawling city below. The lights of Italy twinkled like a constellation, the streets bathed in a soft golden hue that seemed to blur together into a single living entity. The gentle hum of the city reached his ears, but from up here, everything felt still, detached. The chaos of the chase, the rush of his illegal stroll, all felt far away. Izuku stood there for a moment, taking in the view. The cool wind brushed against his skin, lifting strands of his hair as he leaned against the railing. It was quiet up here, peaceful in a way he didn't often get to experience back in Japan. The freckled male finally decided he was done with his stroll, the adrenaline beginning to wear off as exhaustion settled in. His feet carried him toward the edge of the building, where the narrow stairs to the apartment complex were hidden behind a weathered door. Izuku descended the steps slowly, his body still humming with energy despite the fatigue. The quiet stairwell felt like a stark contrast to the rooftop chaos he'd just left behind. Suddenly a hand grabbed him, its grip unyielding and powerful. Before Izuku could even process what was happening, he was yanked into the alleyway, his back slamming against the cold, rusted side of a metal trash can. The sharp clang of metal echoed through the narrow space, but the figure holding him didn't make a sound. It was like they had rehearsed this. The strength of the person was evident, there was no hesitation, no wasted motion, just raw power. Izuku felt his body go rigid as they forced him into place, pinning him against the trash can with an almost effortless authority. His mind raced. Whoever this was, they were clearly stronger than him. Before he could even react, the stranger's other hand shot up and covered his mouth. The pressure was firm, but the touch was deliberate, as if they were trying to stop him from making any sound at all. Izuku tried to breathe through his nose, but the only thing he was breathing in was the scent of caramel, or more like burnt caramel. His heart was pounding in his chest as he strained to move, but the person's grip held him in place, like an iron vice. He couldn't even whisper, let alone call for help. The position the stranger had him in was nearly suffocating, every movement restricted, every breath heavy and shallow. Izuku could feel the weight of their strength, the way their body pressed against his, making it impossible for him to do anything. Even if he was stronger than this person, it wouldn't matter. They had him pinned, and the space between them was filled with an unspoken warning. Any attempt to break free would only make things worse. He could feel the heat of his own panic creeping up, his heart pounding in his chest. But as much as he wanted to struggle, he knew it was futile. Instead, he forced himself to stop, to breathe and think. His mind clicked into survival mode. Think, Izuku. He needed a plan. There had to be something, anything, that could help him escape the situation. As soon as he stopped fighting the hold, the stranger's voice cut through the tense silence, low and cold, but sharp enough to slice through the tension. I'm going to let you go, but you really need to shut the F up and listen closely before I do so. We both don't need to end up in jail. Jail? What is he talking about? And this guy's voice, it's Katsuki. What the hell? Yet Izuku listened to him, despite every fiber of his being wanting to punch the sheet out of him. Katsuki released him, and Izuku turned to face him, staring into those stern, fierce eyes, just inches away. There are roughly 4 cops approaching this trash can right now. In a few seconds, we will either fight them, or I don't plead for mercy. I'm guessing you'd rather the first one. Actually, you don't get a choice. Izuku had no time to process it, no time to think. Before he even realized, his body was already moving, springing into action. The first officer rounded the corner, flashlight slicing through the dim alleyway. Katsuki was on him in a blink, one fluid motion, disarming the man and dropping him with a brutal elbow to the neck. Izuku didn't hesitate. He ducked low, sweeping the legs out from under another, his movements precise and practiced. They fought like a mirrored machine, 2 parts of the same violent rhythm. No wasted motion. No hesitation. Izuku caught a baton mid-swing and redirected it into the ribs of another cop, twisting it from his grip. Katsuki followed with a spin kick to the head, knocking the man out cold. Another officer tried to radio in backup. Katsuki crushed the device under his boot and shoved the man's face into the wall with a vicious grunt. Izuku caught the last one by the collar, yanked him forward, and slammed a fist into his solar plexus. The man dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Then there was silence. Only the sound of their breathing remained, ragged but controlled. The 4 officers lay crumpled around them, groaning or unconscious. Izuku straightened slowly, still tense. What is this? Why are you here? But Katsuki only cracked his neck and interrupted him. No time to explain, move. And Izuku moved, because apparently, that's just what they did. Izuku didn't believe what was happening. Coincidentally, the blonde was just there to save him from being caught from those cops that were probably waiting for him to come down from that building. But why was he there? Was he looking for Izuku? He had so many questions, yet Katsuki didn't want to answer them. After what felt like eternity, the crimson-eyed male finally stopped. He brought Izuku to some strange place, like a ghost town. It was something that he hadn't seen yet during his time in Italy. There weren't any people around. It was quiet enough to hear the breaths from Katsuki. He had his back turned to Izuku, breathing harshly, shoulders rising and falling like he was trying to calm a storm inside his chest. And for once, Izuku could really look at him. He wore a black tank top, sweat clinging to the fabric and making it mold to his skin. It exposed the hard lines of his shoulders, the sharp muscle sculpted across his back like tension carved into flesh. Old scars traced across his shoulder blades, some faint, some angry and white, stories Izuku didn't know but suddenly wanted to. His arms flexed slightly as he adjusted his stance, fingers curling and uncurling like he was still shaking off the fight. He looked dangerous, tired, human, and so goddamn familiar, it hurt. Izuku swallowed thickly, unsure whether the weight in his chest was adrenaline, exhaustion, or something else entirely. You done staring? Katsuki's voice was low, rough from exertion, but there was no real bite behind it. Just a flicker of awareness. I wasn't staring. He quickly retorted, too fast to sound convincing. The blonde scoffed, the sound low and smug. Sure you weren't. Katsuki finally turned to face him, eyes sharp as they scanned Izuku like he was something worth dissecting. Now, let those questions spill. You had plenty to ask earlier. Actually, hold that for a second. I'm not gonna ignore how you were moving back there. You had skill, experience behind those punches, those moves. He paused, taking a few slow steps forward. Each one deliberate, heavy, closer than Izuku wanted. Closer than anyone should be after a fight like that. You don't just pull that out of your but once your life depends on it. Who really are you? The words were sharp, but it was the way Katsuki watched him that made Izuku's spine lock up. He didn't blink. Didn't shift. Just stared, like he was peeling Izuku apart layer by layer. Izuku inhaled without meaning to, and there he was. Katsuki. Right there in his face. He couldn't help but breathe him in, the same familiar scent from earlier. I could ask you the same thing. In fact, why were you there, just coincidentally saving me from those cops? Tell me that first, then I'll really consider telling you something about me. And without realizing it, Izuku had gotten too close enough to feel the heat between them, to notice the tightness in Katsuki's jaw and the way his eyes never left his. The space separating them had all but vanished, and something about it made Izuku's muscles tense. He didn't know if he should consider him an enemy or not. Izuku felt like he was suffocating under Katsuki's silent gaze, unblinking, unreadable, and utterly still. Not a word, not a flicker of emotion came from him, and the weight of his unspoken thoughts pressed down on Izuku like a vice, leaving both of their questions unanswered. Katsuki finally stepped back, putting just enough space between them to draw the line but not enough to ease the pressure. The two stood locked in silence, eyes fixed on each other, neither sure what to say or do next. I'll be real with you, Katsuki finally muttered, his voice low, unreadable. I saw you up there, hopping rooftops like some demon lunatic. His expression didn't shift, but something in his tone had changed, less mocking, more intrigued. Didn't even realize it was you until I yanked you into that alley. I just needed to know what kind of crazy BSTRD would actually try pulling stunts like that. He stepped closer again. Izuku didn't move, didn't breathe, he couldn't. Katsuki was unreadable, unpredictable, like a lit fuse winding toward something dangerous. Thing is, Katsuki continued, gaze narrowing, I was already looking for you. Izuku's stomach dropped. That crap you said outside the cafe? Katsuki chuckled, but there was no humor behind it. Yeah, it set me the hell off. Everything in Izuku's body went cold. His brain screamed at him to run, to move, to do something, but he stood frozen. He couldn't react. He could fight. Hell, he could take him down in a fight. But if he did, Katsuki's crew would tear through the city to find him. The motel room Toshinori and him wouldn't be enough to hide him. Not from them. He wasn't here to make enemies. He was here to end Katsuki's life. Not now. Not like this. Katsuki's smirk curled back into place as he studied Izuku's stillness like it amused him. But you know what's funny? He went on. You, some wide-eyed, freckled guy who looks like he'd volunteer at an animal shelter, you're the one who snapped at me. Told me off like no one else ever has. His smirk faded slightly, gaze shifting for a moment like he was choosing his next words carefully. And the worst part? He added, voice quieter now, almost contemplative. You were right. I've never been in a real relationship. Not once. Not anything real. Just the occasional one-night stands. Izuku swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He couldn't look away from Katsuki, but he couldn't see through him either. Not his next move, not his intent. He didn't know whether to feel proud or absolutely terrified. Now answer my demon question, Katsuki snapped, voice sharp enough to slice through the thick tension. Where the hell did you learn to move like that? Are you some kind of vigilante? What the hell were you doing, parkouring across rooftops like a lunatic? Izuku blinked, still caught between the rush of adrenaline and pure disbelief. Seriously? Did Katsuki really just drag him into a dark alley, unload all that emotional whiplash, and now toss out questions like this was a casual interrogation? Izuku said nothing for a moment, his mind racing. His heart hadn't slowed since the second he was yanked off that staircase. Now, trapped in this alleyway, under the weight of that hard crimson glare, all he could do was think of ways out, while Katsuki waited, impatient, unpredictable, and far too close. All Izuku could think of doing was lying his way out of this. Wasn't anyone who taught me. Just life. When you grow up on your own, you pick things up. Fast. Izuku leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. I didn't have some secret mentor or a fancy trainer. I had back alleys, bad crowds, and a constant need to not die. He gave a dry chuckle. You get jumped enough times. You figure out how to fight back. You spend enough nights running from shit you shouldn't have seen. You start to learn how to move. How to keep quiet. How to climb a fence with a busted ankle and no time to waste. His eyes stayed downcast just long enough to sell it. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. And now I can hop a few rooftops without breaking my neck. Lucky me. Silence hung between them, thick and tense. Then Izuku glanced up, expression perfectly neutral, like he'd said just enough to be convincing, but not enough to seem rehearsed. And when Katsuki looked at him, scrutinizing, but no longer pressing, Izuku knew. He bought it. Internally, he let the smallest flicker of relief pass. He had executed the lie flawlessly. And the roof jumping. Just something I enjoy doing. Izuku let out a nervous laugh, which earned him a deadpan stare from the blonde. The freckled male wasn't exactly lying, just half-butting the truth until it fit. He had, in fact, grown up an orphan. The first person to take him in was a barely functioning addict, always high on something and never really present. He barely remembered her face, let alone her voice. That chapter ended fast. Then came Toshinori. Why the man had chosen to take him in, Izuku still didn't fully understand. But he did, and everything changed after that. Toshinori always claimed he saw potential in him from the very first day, but Izuku never quite believed it. Back then, he was just a scrawny, quiet kid who barely spoke and kept his head down. Nothing special. Still, Toshinori stuck around. More than that, he became the closest thing Izuku ever had to a father. So, you seem capable. The sudden voice snapped Izuku out of his thoughts. Katsuki's gaze was sharp, almost curious, and Izuku felt his chest tighten as their eyes met again. I don't know if you can tell, actually, you probably can. I'm not from here. I'm here with some people, Katsuki said, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. Business sheet. The kind you don't ask too many questions about. The freckled male let out a quiet laugh. You don't have to be so vague. You're in a gang, it's kind of obvious. Katsuki's expression darkened, his smirk disappearing as his eyes narrowed. And how the hell do you know that, Izuku? Izuku bit back a grin, a soft chuckle escaping despite himself. Bold, maybe reckless, but it was already out there. Relax, Katsuki. Your friend? Kershin, nice guy, by the way, cut my hair, did a great job. He tilted his head, watching Katsuki closely. I also happened to overhear your little phone call with him. Well, that's obvious now. You sounded pretty sad. What? Needed intel on me that badly? Izuku tried to hold back his laugh, watching as Katsuki's jaw tightened, his patience clearly thinning by the second. He could practically see the steam rising from him. Yeah, he might have pushed a little too far. Katsuki's eyes narrowed, voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. You think you're funny, huh? He snapped. Must take a lot of guts to run your mouth like that when you've got no idea who the hell you're dealing with. He took a step closer, eyes burning into Izuku's like a challenge. Keep poking, Deku. Let's see how long that smirk stays on your face. Deku? When did he start calling him that? Izuku knew the meaning behind it. Dekunabu. Useless. Worthless. Of course that's what Katsuki meant. What else would it be? He scoffed, trying to hold his ground even as his instincts screamed at him to back off. So what, you're calling me useless now? He shot back, voice steady despite the pressure clawing at his chest. What if I am? Katsuki sneered, his voice low and biting as he took another step forward. What are you going to do about it? There was a flicker of something dangerous in his eyes, amusement, maybe, or a dare. His lip curled into that trademark smirk, the one that said he was just waiting for a reason to throw the first punch. You talk tough, but all I see is some stray with too much attitude and no leash. So go on. He leaned in, eyes narrowing. Prove me wrong, Deku. For some odd reason, Izuku tensed at the word Deku. It made him want to snap back, to do something about the bitchy blonde. Damn it. Calm down, Izuku, he isn't worth it. At least not right now. He took a deep breath, staring hard at Katsuki as if trying to will himself to stay calm. Katsuki noticed this, a flicker of smug satisfaction curling at the corner of his mouth. He could see the tension in Izuku's jaw, the way his fists twitched at his sides. The tables had turned. Izuku was no longer the one tugging at Katsuki's short fuse. Now, it was Katsuki who had found the cracks in Izuku's composure, who knew just which buttons to push and took quiet pride in every flicker of frustration he drew out. Then Katsuki said something that snapped whatever thread of control Izuku had left. It was stupid, so stupid it shouldn't have gotten under his skin the way it did. But it did. It wasn't funny anymore. It wasn't something he could brush off with a grin or a sarcastic comeback. Katsuki leaned in just slightly, a crooked smirk tugging at his mouth, voice low and deliberately provoking. "Come on, Deku. You know you want to." And just like that, every bit of restraint Izuku had left evaporated. The way his jaw clenched, the subtle shift in his footing, it was all the warning Katsuki got before Izuku's fist came flying. Sharp, fast, almost too fast, but Katsuki was faster. He ducked, one hand instinctively catching Izuku's wrist, twisting it to lock his elbow. But Izuku didn't hesitate. He turned with the momentum, kicking his leg up and over in a tight arc, forcing Katsuki to release him as he stumbled back. They both reset, eyes locked. And then they charged. The alley lit up with movement, fists snapping through the air, boots scraping against concrete, the sharp sound of blocked hits and missed blows. Katsuki fought dirty, knees, elbows, feints laced with taunts, but Izuku fought with cold efficiency. He used space, angles, subtle redirections, his movements sharp and disciplined, honed from years of training. A punch from Katsuki clipped Izuku's jaw, a clean hit, but Izuku barely flinched, spinning around and catching Katsuki's ribs with a brutal knee. The blonde grunted, retaliating with a headbutt that forced them both back, breathing heavily. "You really don't know when to quit?" Katsuki growled, wiping a thin line of blood from his lip, eyes wild with a rush of adrenaline. Izuku didn't answer. He was done talking. Katsuki launched himself again, this time more calculated, testing, like he was analyzing Izuku's rhythm. But Izuku met him with equal intensity, blocking the hit and driving his elbow toward Katsuki's chest, only to have it caught. The two of them locked up, muscles straining, teeth gritted, their foreheads practically touching, breath mixing. For a moment, neither moved. "You really think you're some ghost in the night," Katsuki hissed, "but you're just another dumbass who doesn't know who he's messing with." Izuku smiled, not kind, not amused, but grim. "I know exactly who I'm messing with." Then he shoved him off with enough force to make Katsuki stumble, and that was enough for Izuku to vault backward, flipping onto a nearby dumpster and up toward the fire escape above, gaining height. Katsuki looked up, fury and admiration flashing through his eyes in equal measure. "Don't run now, Deku," he shouted. "We're not done." Izuku paused on the edge of the rooftop, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth, eyes fierce. "I'm not running," he called back. "I just don't want to bury you tonight." And then he disappeared into the dark. The BSRD knew exactly how to push his buttons, and he did it with surgical precision. Not in a clever, witty way. No, Katsuki's brand of provocation was maddening, unrelenting, and dangerously effective. He didn't just insult, he dissected. Every word, every smirk, was designed to dig under Izuku's skin and light a fire he didn't want burning. And it was working. Izuku hated to admit it, but Katsuki was good. Too good. No one had ever gotten under his skin like this before, not this fast, not this deep. Izuku wasn't the kind of guy to snap at the first insult. He had restraint, discipline, lines he refused to cross unless absolutely necessary. But Katsuki made those lines blur with a few sentences, like it was easy. Like he knew exactly where to strike. Izuku could feel it now, pulsing through his veins like venom, the urge to wipe that cocky grin off his face, to throw every carefully built moral code to the wind and just swing. And that's what terrified him the most. Katsuki didn't just PSS him off. He made him want to lose control. It made him want to torture him. Not kill him so he can get it over with as quickly as he can. Izuku wanted to torture him till he wanted to die. Izuku finally made it back to the motel, exhausted, scuffed up, and running an hour late. It was already 5 a.m., and he was supposed to have been back by Toshinori was probably asleep, but that didn't stop the guilt from gnawing at him as he crept through the hallway like a shadow. Still, as much as he wanted to focus on anything else, the mission, the consequences, even just getting some DMN sleep, his mind refused to let go of one thing. Katsuki. No matter how many times he tried to push it aside, redirect his thoughts, distract himself, it always came back to that blonde BSRD. That smug voice, those sharp words, the way he moved like he already owned the ground he walked on. It infuriated him. Why was he stuck on this? Why was someone like Katsuki arrogant, reckless, infuriating, still echoing in his head? It made his blood boil. He hated it. He hated him. Didn't he? He did. He was sure of it. Izuku was here for one reason, and one reason only. This was a mission, nothing more. There was no room for feelings, no space for doubt. He couldn't afford to feel anything but the cold, focused intent to kill. Hatred wasn't a choice, it was the only weapon he had left. He was an emotional man. He felt things when it suited him. But Izuku didn't need effort to sense the tension between him and Katsuki. It was thick, cloying, impossible to ignore. It had to be severed. Whatever that man once was, whatever excuse he gave for still breathing, Izuku needed to feel nothing for him but hatred. So, from this day forward, he decided he would be nothing but an a-hole to Katsuki. As soon as Izuku's eyes opened, his first thought was Katsuki. Katsuki, the hot-headed blonde, the walking explosion. It wasn't fear. He wasn't afraid Katsuki would come after him, at least, not in the way that should have mattered. No, it was something worse. It was the fact that Katsuki had embedded himself in his head like a splinter, sharp and impossible to ignore. Out of all people, it had to be him. That cocky, loud-mouthed Bisardi with the sharp tongue and hotter temper. That smirk. Those eyes that looked right through him like he was being dissected. Katsuki was fire raw, consuming, dangerous, and Izuku hated that some part of him seemed drawn to the heat. He dragged a hand down his face, groaning into the motel pillow. This wasn't supposed to happen. Katsuki was supposed to be a target, an obstacle, someone he could outwit or outrun. Not someone who'd keep him awake all night, wired from the fight, replaying every word, every movement. It didn't help that Katsuki had challenged him, pushed all the right buttons and then some. And Izuku? He reacted. He felt something. And that set him off even more. He sighed again, eyes fixed on the cracked ceiling above him. Katsuki Bakugou was a problem. And now, he was Izuku's problem. He'd drawn the line the night before, sharp and final. Izuku had to feel nothing for him but hatred. No curiosity. No fascination. No weakness. Just pure, necessary hatred. Because anything else, anything softer, could unravel everything. Izuku clenched his jaw, forcing the thought down like a bitter pill. He had to do everything in his power not to go back on his word. Not to falter. Not to let that smug BSRD slip through the cracks in his resolve. He wasn't here to feel. He was here to finish what he started. And whatever he was feeling for Katsuki had to stop immediately. Just Izuku's luck, it had to be today of all days that the city was overflowing. Citizens, officers, tourists, hell, it felt like all of Italy had decided to flood the streets at once. And it wasn't even noon yet. On any other day, Izuku might have taken the chance to blend in, mess around a bit in the city, kill some time. But not now. It was too crowded. Too exposed. And oddly enough, every person who passed him gave him a strange look, subtle, but telling. They avoided standing too close, kept their distance like he was some ticking time bomb. Like they knew something they shouldn't. It unsettled him more than he cared to admit. He hadn't committed any crime, not one he'd ever been caught for. Except for that night, the night he barely slipped through the authorities' grasp. But there was no way they could have uncovered his identity. Then it hit him. His blood. That diamond cut he'd ignored during the chase. How could he have been so reckless? He knew better. He always knew better. And on top of that, he still didn't know who tipped off the police. That shadow was still out there watching. Waiting. He was exposed. Vulnerable. He was compromised in ways he couldn't fix. Izuku stopped walking. He'd been too wrapped up in his thoughts, drowning in the noise of the crowd, to notice it right away. But someone was following him. And they weren't being subtle about it. There was no reason for Izuku to overthink the stares from passers-by, because they weren't directed at him. They were aimed at the man trailing behind him. Izuku turned abruptly, instincts already bracing for a fight. "Took you long enough," the man muttered. He looked like sleep was a foreign concept, messy black hair falling past his shoulders, dark circles carved beneath tired, sharp eyes. There was something off about him. Detached. Why was he following Izuku? Who the hell was this guy? "You alive in there or just staring because I forgot to shave?" the man deadpanned. "Relax. If I meant harm, you wouldn't have seen me coming." Izuku took in a sharp breath, still confused. "Why are you following me? Especially on a busy day like this, with people pushing by. Why?" His gaze didn't waver. Crowds are useful. People don't notice when someone disappears in the middle of one. He stepped closer, just enough to speak without being overheard. "I've been tracking patterns. And your name, or rather, your lack of one, keeps coming up in connection to Toshinori Yagi." He paused. "I want to know if you're working with him." Izuku didn't flinch, but his heartbeat did. "I don't know who that is," he said flatly, eyes steady. Measured. "You've got the wrong person." He didn't blink. It wasn't agreement. Wasn't disbelief either. Just observation. The raven-haired guy studied him, then exhaled through his nose. "You don't look like the usual street trash, but you've been getting close to someone who does." Izuku frowned. "Who?" "Katsuki," he said simply. "My guy. Works under me." Now it made sense. The warning tone. "Be careful." "But I know where you met. The cafe, right?" He continued. "He says you're interesting. That usually means dangerous." Izuku didn't respond. "So here's the deal," he said. "If you're clean, you've got nothing to worry about. But if you're with Toshinori, walk away now. Because if I find out you're playing both sides," he let the sentence hang like a blade. Then he turned and vanished into the sea of people, his presence lingering like smoke after a fire. Izuku let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. That man was onto him. And something about the way he spoke, too calm, too direct, made Izuku's skin crawl. He replayed the moment in his head, the dull, unimpressed tone, the way he moved through the crowd without being seen, like a ghost who chose when to exist. Then it hit him. The hair. The eyes. The way he said, "Katsuki's my guy." Izuku's stomach turned. That wasn't just some street-level enforcer or curious rival. That was Shoyuda Aizawa. He hadn't recognized him at first. Toshinori had only ever mentioned the name in passing, but now it clicked. They had history, that much was clear. What Izuku hadn't known, though, was that Katsuki worked under him. Until now, he hadn't thought he needed to worry about whoever that blonde was tied to. Just what he needed, another name added to the list of people he couldn't afford to underestimate. The Aizawa. Gang leader. Shadow operator. The man who built an empire on silence, control, and fear. And the one person Katsuki actually listened to. Izuku clenched his fists. This mission was already dangerous. But now, with Aizawa watching him, Izuku knew their paths were bound to cross again, sooner rather than later. He also had a sinking feeling Aizawa was the one who tipped off the authorities. It made sense. If Aizawa was already onto him long before Katsuki even mentioned his name, then this was classic. He was the type to test people from the shadows, never getting his hands dirty, but always making sure the message was clear. Playing games with the police, pushing Izuku into the spotlight without showing himself, it was all part of the setup. Aizawa wanted to see how far Izuku could be pushed, how he'd handle the pressure when the walls closed in. And now Izuku was caught in the middle of that silent game, forced to move carefully, always watching his back. One wrong move, and it wouldn't just be the police he'd have to worry about. If they ever found solid proof he was working with Toshinori, he'd be finished. Mission over. He couldn't afford that risk. Izuku had to move carefully, calculated, precise, and completely under the radar. If he wants this to be a successful mission, he has to prove to Aizawa he has nothing to be suspicious about, that he can trust him. Izuku finally realized that this wasn't some regular mission, to kill some rando and get it over with. This was real. Izuku knew he had to get closer to Katsuki. He'd kind of blown it the other day, but there was no backing down now. He needed a way to talk to him again. He had a few options. One was Kirishima, but that felt awkward. He didn't know how much Kirishima knew, and suddenly asking about Katsuki would come out of nowhere. The second was to return to that place Katsuki had taken him to before. It clearly meant something to the blonde, so maybe he'd be there again. And then there was the cafe. It seemed like a long shot, maybe even dumb, but what if Katsuki had a habit of coming there regularly? It was worth checking. Izuku turned on his phone for a quick second, checking the time. It was around the same hour he'd last seen Katsuki there. Weaving through the crowd, he made his way to the cafe. It was a gamble, especially on a day like this with the streets packed, but it was worth a shot. The door chimed as he stepped inside. Predictably, the place was crowded as hell. Izuku scanned the room carefully, quietly hoping, just hoping Katsuki would be there. And there he was. Sitting in the corner, a coffee in one hand, the other scrolling through his phone. Izuku let out a quiet breath of relief, a small smile tugging at his lips. Jeppa. He walked over and sat down across from him without a word. Katsuki glanced up, expression unreadable, then looked back at his phone like he hadn't processed it yet. A beat passed. Then his eyes snapped back up, recognition hitting him like a jolt. What the F dash dot? Katsuki blinked, clearly thrown. Izuku let out a quiet laugh, amused by the reaction. Took you a second, he said, leaning back slightly. Figured you'd be here. Katsuki narrowed his eyes, still not putting his phone down. You following me now, or is this some weird coincidence? Izuku shrugged, still keeping his tone casual. Let's call it intuition. Katsuki didn't answer right away. He glanced at Izuku again, like he was trying to read something beneath the surface, then finally set his phone down, fingers still drumming lightly against the table. You always show up out of nowhere like this? He muttered. Only when it counts, Izuku said, a small grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Katsuki scoffed under his breath, but the tension in his shoulders had eased just a little. Since Katsuki didn't say anything, Izuku took the opportunity to steer the conversation. So, he began casually, drumming his fingers lightly against the table, I ran into someone yesterday. Katsuki looked up, just slightly. Guy was tall. Black hair looked half dead, honestly. Had this presence. The kind that makes a crowd move without him saying a word. Izuku's tone was easy, but his eyes were sharp, watching Katsuki for any flicker of reaction. He stopped me. Said something weird, like he was testing me or something. Mentioned you too. That you worked under him. Katsuki's brows knit, his jaw tightening. Didn't give a name, Izuku added with a shrug. But I figured he wasn't just some random guy. Katsuki was quiet, but Izuku caught it, recognition. And something else. Wariness. He didn't press further. He already knew exactly who the man was. Shoyuta Aizawa. Izuku just leaned back, letting his words hang between them. Katsuki stared at him, silent for a beat too long. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes narrowing like he was trying to peel the truth off Izuku's face. You sure he didn't give you a name? Izuku blinked, feigning confusion. Pretty sure. Why? Katsuki didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch, tense, heavy before speaking again. Because the guy you're talking about doesn't just run into people. Especially not people he doesn't already know about. Izuku held his ground, even though he could feel Katsuki pressing in, suspicion thick in his voice. You're telling me he just walked up to you out of nowhere, said I work for him, and then dipped? Katsuki scoffed. Bullshit. Izuku exhaled through his nose, keeping his expression neutral. You think I'm lying? I think you're leaving something out. They stared at each other, quiet but charged. Izuku didn't flinch. Couldn't. One slip, and Katsuki might start digging deeper than he already was. Katsuki leaned forward slightly, voice low. You wanna lie, fine. But don't insult my DMN intelligence. Izuku exhaled slowly, jaw tight. He weighed his next move carefully. All right, he muttered, gaze dropping to the table for a brief second before meeting Katsuki's eyes again. He didn't just mention you. Katsuki's expression sharpened. Izuku went on, slowly. He followed me through half a district. I only noticed because he wanted me to. Cornered me near some alley. Started asking questions. Felt like he already had answers. Katsuki's shoulders tensed. Said you worked under him. Said he was curious about me. Like he wanted to figure out if I was worth knowing or, Izuku trailed off. Or worth eliminating. A flicker of something passed over Katsuki's face. Concern, maybe. Distrust. Guy had weight. Everything about him said he was the one pulling strings. Katsuki didn't say anything. I didn't do anything to provoke it, Izuku added, tone calm. But it felt like a test. Like he already knew who I was. Finally, Katsuki leaned back. Yeah, he muttered. That sounds like him. Izuku said nothing, letting the moment breathe. Katsuki clicked his tongue. If he's watching you, he sees something. He doesn't waste time on nobodies. Izuku gave a quiet nod, the words settling heavy in his chest. Exactly. And that was the problem. He couldn't have Aizawa watching his every step. He simply couldn't afford someone breath down his back, especially not with a mission this delicate. Izuku needed to gain his trust quickly, or else Aizawa would be monitoring him nonstop. The silence stretched between them until Katsuki broke it, slicing through the stillness with a sly grin. Why'd you come find me? Izuku stayed quiet, refusing to feed into his ego. Katsuki's smirk deepened as he leaned in, voice low and teasing. Missed me? The question snapped Izuku from his trance. He bit his lip, fighting the smile threatening to escape, small, reluctant, but undeniably real. Maybe, Izuku finally muttered, shaking his head as if to clear the fog. Or maybe I needed to see if you were actually worth the trouble. Katsuki chuckled, the sound rough but pleased. Good answer. Izuku had sworn to himself he'd keep his distance, stay cold and distant, be nothing but an a-hole to Katsuki. But somehow he'd already failed. Standing there, caught off guard by that cocky smirk, Izuku couldn't help it. Katsuki just made it impossible to hate him. And without even realizing, the words slipped out, loud and clear, you make it hard to hate you. Katsuki's smirk only grew, sharp and knowing. Careful, flattery might get you somewhere. Izuku froze. There was no way those words actually left his mouth. But the heat crawling up his neck said otherwise. His face burned as embarrassment bloomed across his cheeks, and he instinctively averted his gaze, eyes darting to anything that wasn't Katsuki. He could feel the flush rising, betraying every effort to play it cool. Oh my god. I didn't mean to say that. Pretend you didn't hear that, he blurted, voice barely above a whisper as he buried his face in one hand, utterly mortified. Katsuki didn't say anything right away, but the grin on his face said enough. He was enjoying every second of Izuku's unraveling. Katsuki leaned back in his chair, arms crossing over his chest as a slow, wicked grin tugged at the corners of his mouth. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he looked at Izuku, really looked at him, as if taking a moment to drink him in, studying every twitch of his expression, every trace of that flustered blush. Didn't mean to say it, huh? Sure didn't sound like an accident. Izuku wanted to disappear into the crowded cafe. He simply couldn't believe what was happening right now. Izuku groaned into his hands, like that would somehow muffle the entire situation away. I hate you. Stop. He let out a short breath, half a laugh, half a scoff, eyes flicking over Izuku. You don't hate me, he said, his voice surprisingly low and teasing, like he was letting Izuku in on some kind of secret. You could never. Yes, I do. Izuku shot back, glaring at him, but the flush on his cheeks betrayed every word. His hands rested firmly on the table, fingers twitching with barely contained frustration. He avoided Katsuki's gaze, shifting in his seat like the chair had suddenly turned uncomfortable. Sure, the blonde drawled, clearly entertained. That's why you came all the way here just to stare at me like a kicked puppy. Izuku groaned under his breath, dragging a hand through his hair in frustration. I swear to God, I'm never talking to you again. Bold, Katsuki chuckled, for someone who tracked me down just to flirt. I would never flirt with someone like you. Izuku shot back, eyes flashing with mock indignation. Someone like me? What's that supposed to mean? Katsuki raised an eyebrow. Izuku snorted, a grin tugging at his lips. It means you're a cocky, bitchy, egotistical bastard. Katsuki scoffed, shaking his head. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense. Or maybe you're just stupid. Izuku crossed his arms, a stern expression hardening his features. I'm anything but stupid. Oh really dash. Izuku was cut off as one of the baristas appeared at their table, her expression a mix of politeness and exhaustion. Excuse me, could you two please keep it down a bit? You're kind of disturbing the other customers, she said softly. Izuku and Katsuki exchanged a glance. There was a silent conversation between them, loaded with unspoken words. When Izuku finally looked up, he caught the curious, sometimes annoyed stares from the other patrons. Embarrassing. I'm really sorry, miss. I got carried away. It won't happen again, Izuku said earnestly, his tone sincere as the barista nodded and walked away. Turning back to Katsuki, Izuku whispered harshly, Look what you did. You got too loud. Katsuki held his gaze a moment longer before clearing his throat. Don't even. That was both our faults. Some credit for it. Izuku raised an eyebrow, noticing how Katsuki's usual cockiness had slipped away for a moment. That I wouldn't have raised my voice if you hadn't been teasing me. Katsuki smirked, gesturing toward him with a chuckle. Any normal person would. Look at you, you look like you stuff your face with books like some kinda nerd. Izuku bit his cheek, annoyed he still hadn't shaken the nickname. Don't call me that. It's Izuku, not Deku. Katsuki's eyebrow quirked, not curious, more like he was daring Izuku to explain. Because I'm not useless. Izuku snapped, offended. Should I give you a nickname you hate? Is that what you want? Katsuki laughed, clearly amused. You wouldn't. Actually, you couldn't. What nickname could you possibly come up with for me? Izuku thought for a moment, wanting something childish, something that would make Katsuki cringe every time he heard it. Kaken. He said softly, a small, sheepish smile tugging at his lips. Katsuki's smirk vanished, replaced by a scowl as his eyebrows knitted in irritation. No. I'm not having it. That's corny as hell. Where did you even get that idea dash? Ah, don't like it? Kaken. I think it suits you. Stop saying it. Katsuki snapped, glaring. Kachen, Izuku teased, dragging out the nickname with a playful grin. I'm leaving. Goodbye. Katsuki shook his head in disbelief, a dry, breathy laugh slipping out as he got up. Izuku giggled at his little tantrum, clearly pleased with himself, before pushing out of his seat to follow him. It hadn't even been 5 minutes, and the nickname was already driving Kaken up the wall. The door chimed as they both stepped out of the cafe, the city noise rushing in to meet them. Oh, come on, Izuku teased, falling into step beside him. The one time things don't go your way and you're already pouting about it? Katsuki shot him a withering look over his shoulder, the muscle in his jaw twitching. I'm not pouting, dumbass. I just don't respond to garbage nicknames made by giggling gremlins. Izuku snorted, clearly unbothered, hands in his pockets as he trailed close behind. Giggling gremlins? That's rich, coming from the guy who just threw a tantrum over 2 syllables. Katsuki groaned louder this time, raking a hand through his hair like the name itself physically pained him. You're seriously the most annoying person I've ever met. Izuku only smiled wider, smug satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. And yet you keep talking to me. Makes you wonder who's really losing here, Kaken. Katsuki stopped walking for a second, exhaled sharply through his nose, half a laugh, half a growl, and muttered, I swear to God if you say it one more time. Kaken. Izuku said sweetly. Dead to me. Izuku grinned. Worth it. The two walked side by side, their conversation flowing with ease, bantering like they were old friends who'd known each other for years. For some reason, they just clicked. Izuku could feel it, undeniable and natural. Katsuki, of course, was far too proud to ever say it out loud, but it was there, clear as day. After a while, Katsuki came to a sudden stop, and Izuku nearly kept walking before noticing. He turned, only to find the blonde staring at him with that same unreadable look, sharp, unreadable, and quietly intense. "What did you mean the other night?" His voice was softer than usual, lacking its typical rough edge. There was something curious in it, almost hesitant, like he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. Izuku blinked, thrown off by the change in tone. But before he could even open his mouth, Katsuki continued, stepping in closer. "When you said, 'I just don't want to bury you tonight.'" His eyes narrowed, guarded but alert, like he was waiting for a strike. "Maybe it was heat of the moment sheet, but you looked serious." He exhaled, something tighter hidden beneath the words. "If you want me to take you as a threat, Deku, now's your chance. Say it straight. I'm not about to keep FNG around with someone who's trying to stab me in the back." Izuku's breath caught in his throat, mind scrambling for a response. He had to lie, there was no other option. "You can trust me, Kaken. I'm not here to pick a fight with you or your crew." Katsuki didn't budge, his eyes still searching, still waiting. Izuku sighed quietly, gaze dropping for a second before lifting again. "I said that because I didn't want it to end right there. Not like that. I wanted to finish it properly, later. When it actually mattered." Katsuki blinked, then let out a low, amused laugh. "So what, you want to get your butt kicked on a better night? That it?" Izuku rolled his eyes. "That's not what I meant." Katsuki smirked, that cocky glint returning to his eyes. "Sure sounded like it." The freckled male scoffed, clearly annoyed. "You underestimate me, Kaken." Katsuki let out a half-stifled chuckle, voice dripping with sarcasm. "I can't take you seriously from all the way down there." Izuku clicked his tongue against the inside of his cheek, biting back a retort as he narrowed his eyes. The blonde wasn't even that much taller, maybe an inch or two, but he was definitely milking it. Without warning, Izuku reached up and grabbed Katsuki by the ear, tugging him down to eye level with surprising confidence. The move wiped the smugness clean off Katsuki's face. His breath hitched slightly, eyes going wide as he found himself suddenly face to face with Izuku. "You hear me better now?" Izuku muttered, voice low and sharp. "You won't be laughing when I put you flat on your back." Katsuki blinked, thrown by how bold the smaller male had gotten. His mouth opened slightly like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. Izuku bit the inside of his cheek, quickly letting him go. Katsuki straightened up quickly, rubbing his ear and scowling, though the faint flush at the tips betrayed him. "Bold move," he muttered, eyes narrowing with a mix of irritation and amusement. "Getting a little full of yourself, aren't you?" Izuku just raised an eyebrow, daring him to say more. But Katsuki only huffed, rolling his shoulders like he was shaking something off. "Guess I should have expected it. You've got a mouth on you when you're not busy pretending to be all meek and innocent." Then, with a sly grin, "Careful. Keep talking like that, and I might start liking you. Careful. Keep talking like that, and I might start liking you." Izuku choked on absolutely nothing. He really hoped Katsuki didn't mean that. Heat was already crawling up his neck, but he shoved the feeling down with a clenched jaw. "Yeah, well, I'll make a mental note not to talk to you like that again," he snapped, his tone sharper than he meant it to be. Katsuki scoffed, not out of offense, but with a mocking edge that grated under Izuku's skin. It wasn't just a sound, it was a statement, like he saw straight through Izuku's forced composure. "Right. Let's see how long you can keep that attitude in check before I get under your skin again." Before Izuku could fire back, Katsuki's phone buzzed. The blonde let out a low groan as he pulled it from his pocket, squinting at the screen before putting it to his ear. "What do you want?" he said flatly. Izuku couldn't make out the voice on the other end, but if he had to guess, it was probably Aizawa. That sharp tone Katsuki only ever used when talking to someone he couldn't ignore, it gave it away. The call didn't last long. A few curt replies, a sigh, and then Katsuki tucked the phone away and turned to him. "Deku," he said, already half-turning, "I gotta run. You coming or not?" Izuku's eyes widened. He hadn't expected Katsuki to offer. But he wasn't about to waste the opportunity. "Right behind you, Kaken." Katsuki sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose before a dry chuckle escaped him. "Enough with the nickname already." "Yeah, no," Izuku replied with a shrug, lips tugging up into a faint smirk. Katsuki shook his head but didn't argue further. Instead, he stepped out toward the curb, hand raised as he flagged down a passing taxi. The sleek black car slowed to a stop, tires hissing against the cobblestones. Katsuki yanked the door open and jerked his head toward Izuku, motioning him in without a word. The cab smelled like cheap cologne and worn leather. Izuku slid in beside Katsuki, the engine purring to life as the driver asked for a destination. Katsuki leaned forward, muttering something low and specific, definitely not a tourist spot. The driver gave a subtle nod, and they were off. They weaved through tight alleys and unfamiliar streets, the chatter of the city fading behind the hum of the cab. Izuku glanced out the window, watching the buildings shift from charming, bustling neighborhoods to quieter, rougher edges of town. It was a part of Italy most tourists didn't see, a side where secrets lived in shadows and loyalty meant more than law. As the streets grew more desolate, Izuku quietly pulled out his phone, thumbs moving quickly as he typed out a message to Toshinori. His contact name was listed as Mom, just in case anyone ever checked. "Hey Mom, met a new friend, invited me over. Might stick around for a little while, so don't expect me to be back soon." Simple, innocuous, but layered with meaning. Katsuki and his crew were the new friend. The invite was to whatever base they were headed toward. And "might stick around" was code for, "I'm going in deeper. Keep watch." By the time he hit send, the cab had slowed in front of a tucked-away industrial building, its exterior disguised as nothing more than a quiet warehouse. Katsuki cracked his knuckles and pushed the door open without a word. "Home sweet home," he muttered. Izuku stepped out behind him, gaze sharp as he took in the place. Armed guards at the corners. Discreet cameras. No sign, no address. Just the kind of place that whispered, "You don't come here unless you're invited." And right now he was walking in. The two approached a tall iron gate, guarded by a sharp-eyed man in tactical black leaning against the wall. As they neared, Katsuki stepped ahead, exchanging a brief but intricate handshake with the man, quick slaps, a knuckle tap, then a snap. Casual but deliberate. Izuku blinked, a little thrown when the small talk that followed flowed smoothly in fluent Italian. He tried not to react, but Katsuki speaking a whole other language without a single hint before now? That caught him off guard. Then, as if remembering he wasn't alone, Katsuki tilted his head back toward Izuku and gestured lazily. "This is Deku. Deku, meet Leonardo." "Nice to meet you, Leonardo," Izuku said, expression blank as he nodded slowly. Leonardo simply grinned, either unfazed or entirely clueless, and waved them through without a word. The gate creaked open, letting them in. As they walked along a narrow outdoor corridor flanked by weathered brick and steel piping, Izuku finally broke the silence. "You speak Italian? When were you going to mention that?" Katsuki huffed a laugh. "Calm down. What, you want me to list every skill I've got? Didn't think it was relevant. Right?" Izuku muttered, eyes narrowing. "God forbid you ever be humble for once in your life." Katsuki shot him a crooked grin but didn't answer. Izuku trailed behind him, scanning every corner, every camera, his nerves spiking with each step. This wasn't some random hideout. It was a base. Organized. Guarded. Controlled. And if he knew anything about Katsuki, his crew probably already had a file with Izuku's name, face, and shoe size on it. They finally reached a thick steel door embedded in concrete, a keypad glowing faintly beside it. Katsuki punched in a code with practiced ease, beep, beep, click. The lock buzzed, a soft mechanical growl rumbling from inside. Katsuki leaned back and gave Izuku a mock polite wave forward. "After you, princess." Izuku rolled his eyes but stepped inside anyway, trying not to look too tense. As the door shut behind them with a solid clunk, The weight of who he was with, settled heavily on his shoulders. Katsuki placed his hands firmly on Izuku's shoulders, nudging him to the side so he could walk past. The contact made Izuku freeze for a split second, caught off guard by the unexpected touch. It wasn't aggressive, not like their fight. No jabs, no force, no threat. Just movement. And for some reason, that threw Izuku off more than a punch ever could. Shaking the thought, he turned his focus to the space around him. The inside was surprisingly relaxed for what he assumed was a gang hideout. His eyes swept over the room, warm lighting, a few worn-in couches, a sleek table cluttered with cards, and a wall-mounted TV quietly playing some local broadcast. On one of the couches sat a familiar face, Kirishima, grinning as always, chatting with a blonde guy whose hair stuck up like he had been electrocuted. The moment Izuku and Katsuki stepped in, both of them looked over. Their gazes landed on Izuku, curious, assessing. Kirishima gave him a small nod of acknowledgement, while the yellow-haired guy leaned in closer to whisper something to him, his eyes never leaving. Izuku. It made Izuku feel a little uneasy that they were most likely whispering about him, but he tried to pay no mind to it. "Where's the rest of the extras?" Katsuki asked the two, raising a brow. The blonde-haired guy looked over at Katsuki, casual but alert. "Ciro's talking with Aizawa. Mina's still in her room, I think." Izuku absorbed the information silently, his eyes shifting between the two. 5 people? That was it? For a crew tied to someone like Aizawa, he expected more. Maybe the rest stayed back in Japan, probably managing operations or laying low. Which would mean these 4, excluding Katsuki, were the elite, the ones trusted enough to be here, wherever here even was. It was a thought worth circling back to with Katsuki later. Katsuki glanced between Denki and Izuku, then jerked his chin toward the freckled male lazily. "Right. This dumbass is dead, don't ask, long story." Denki pet an eyebrow, smirking. "Dega? That's the name we're going with." He stood and extended a hand, a spark of amusement in his golden eyes. "Denki Kaminari. I'm the friendly one, by the way." Izuku took his hand, giving a firm shake, though his expression remained neutral. "Sure you are," he muttered with the smallest twitch of a grin. Kirishima leaned back on the couch, stretching his arms behind his head. "Don't let him fool you. He's only friendly until you touch his snacks." Denki shot him a look. One time I lost it over a stolen energy bar and suddenly I'm branded for life." A short giggle escaped Izuku before he could stop it, quiet, but genuine. For a bunch of criminals, they were surprisingly normal. Not what he expected from a gang known for its reputation. Instead of harsh glares and cold silence, there was casual banter, easy laughter, and an oddly domestic atmosphere that made him feel more like a guest than a threat. He glanced between the 3 in front of him, Kirishima still grinning, Denki dramatically sulking, and Katsuki looking like he was already regretting bringing him here. Yeah, normal wasn't the word he thought he'd be using. Katsuki let out an exaggerated groan, laced with heavy sarcasm. "How annoying can you two be?" Denki and Kirishima didn't even flinch, like they were long used to being insulted by Katsuki on a daily basis. Then, he shot a quick glance over his shoulder, eyes locking with Izuku's in a way that said "move it, nerd," without a single word. Then, with a subtle tilt of his head, he turned and started walking, fully expecting Izuku to follow. Which is exactly what Izuku did. Izuku trailed behind the blonde up the creaking staircase, his steps light but cautious. They reached a narrow hallway with 4 doors lining the walls, each identical at first glance. Without needing confirmation, Izuku could already guess where they were headed, Katsuki's room. Out of everyone, he was the one being brought inside? That alone was enough to make his thoughts spiral. For someone as guarded as Katsuki, this felt unexpected. The blonde pushed the door open and gave a nod, silently motioning for Izuku to go in first. Izuku stepped inside, unsure of what he expected, but definitely not this. The room was cozy, surprisingly so. Organized, but with a distinct sense of personality, like Katsuki had put real thought into it. Everything from the sleek shelves to the worn leather chair in the corner screamed controlled chaos, Just like him. It had edge but warmth too. Not sterile. Not hollow. You have a nice room, Izuku said, breaking the silence. Is that a surprise? Katsuki shot back with a side-eye, already on the defensive. Izuku paused before answering, considering his words. Honestly? A little bit. Katsuki scoffed, full of mock offense. Shut the hell up. My room back in. He stopped himself, jaw tightening mid-sentence. The glare he shot Izuku wasn't angry, it was guarded. Defensive. But Izuku already knew. He didn't need him to finish it. Japan. Even without the word, it hung heavy in the air between them. My room back in Japan is 10 times better, Katsuki muttered, eyes flicking away, voice lower now. Like he hadn't decided whether saying that was a mistake. Izuku didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The silence felt weighted. Uncomfortable, but not in a bad way. More like something unspoken passed between them. Katsuki cleared his throat, sharp, awkward. Anyway, he muttered, shifting his weight before turning to face Izuku more fully. I don't let people in here. Don't make me regret it, Deku. Izuku gave a mock salute, smirking. You got it, Kaken. But Katsuki was stupid if he thought leaving him alone in his room wouldn't lead to anything. The second the shower turned on and the door clicked shut, Izuku was already eyeing the space like a curious cat. He wandered past the bed, trailing his fingers along the edge of a shelf lined with manga and detailed figurines. His gaze lingered until something on the desk caught his attention. A glasses case. Oh, this was gold. He cracked it open and, sure enough, a pristine pair of glasses rested inside. Izuku's grin was immediate and wicked. He barely had time to savor it before he heard the bathroom door creak open. Perfect timing. Katsuki started. Kaken. Izuku cut in, holding up the glasses with a mischievous glint in his eye. Glasses, huh? The tips of Katsuki's ears turned crimson. He stormed toward him, wet hair clinging to his forehead. Give it, he growled. Izuku swiftly tucked the glasses behind his back, his lips twitching as he fought back laughter. You call me a nerd, and yet you've got these? He teased, backing away as Katsuki tried to snatch them. You hypocrite. Katsuki stepped closer, frustration radiating off him in waves. Izuku could smell it now. Burnt caramel, sharp and warm, clung to the steam rising off his skin. His shirt stuck to his chest in damp patches, and droplets of water dripped from the ends of his hair, trailing down his jaw. And God, he was handsome. The realization hit Izuku like a slap. He's known that Katsuki is good-looking, but seeing him like this? He blinked, heat flooding his face. Nope. Don't go there. He retreated farther, heart pounding. Katsuki kept reaching, but Izuku dodged every time, stepping closer and closer to the wall behind him. Nerd, I swear to God, Katsuki's jaw clenched, eyes narrowing, his patience fraying fast. Izuku's back hit the wall with a soft thud. He was trapped. The smugness vanished from his face in an instant as Katsuki loomed in, damp and annoyed and entirely too close. His heartbeat kicked up a notch. You're cornering me, Izuku said quickly, trying and failing to sound unimpressed. That's not very fair. Katsuki raised a brow, the corner of his mouth twitching like he was trying not to smirk. Neither is stealing my sheet. Izuku didn't flinch. Didn't move an inch. He just looked up at Katsuki with that same defiant spark in his eye, even with his back against the wall. Katsuki's gaze darkened, sharp and expectant, like he was waiting for Izuku to cave. Well? He asked, voice low, eyes flicking down to where Izuku's hands were still hidden behind his back. But Izuku just grinned. Oh, not so easy. You're going to have to take them from me, Kaken. Katsuki clicked his tongue, eyes narrowing. You Deku, he muttered under his breath, voice gravelly and close enough to graze Izuku's skin. Then he lunged. It wasn't a full attack, but it was quick and precise. Katsuki grabbed at his wrist, yanking it forward. Izuku twisted, trying to dodge, but Katsuki was faster. The glasses case was nearly free when Izuku turned his body, clutching it tighter behind him. Oh, you little, Katsuki growled, stepping in even closer, so close their chests almost brushed. His hand slid around Izuku's waist, grabbing at his other arm with a firm grip. Izuku's breath hitched. "Personal space, ever heard of it?" he rasped, but his voice lacked its usual bite. "Not when people steal my sheet," Katsuki shot back, yanking Izuku's arms apart with a burst of strength. The case slipped. In one swift motion, Katsuki snatched it midair, holding it triumphantly as he stepped back, though not far. The air between them felt charged, heavy with heat and something unspoken. Izuku stared at him, cheeks flushed and pulse racing. Katsuki's smirk was smug, but his eyes flicked over Izuku's face, like he wasn't entirely unaffected either. "Serves you right," Katsuki muttered, slipping the glasses case into his back pocket. Izuku folded his arms, trying to act composed. "Still a nerd. Say that again and I'll shove them on your face instead." Izuku grinned. "Kanki why?" Katsuki blinked, jaw twitching. "Shut up, Deku." The blonde stepped away from him, disappearing into the bathroom again. "Good." Izuku let out a slow breath, pulse still racing. Those crimson eyes, sharp, unrelenting, had pinned him in place, burned into his memory. He could still feel the weight of that stare, like Katsuki had branded him without even touching him. It wasn't long before Katsuki stepped back out, toothbrush in his mouth, lazily brushing his teeth. His hair was still damp, spiked unevenly from the towel drying, with water trailing from the tips down his temples. The corners of his mouth were dusted with foam, but his eyes were already on Izuku, watchful, unwavering. "Could you wear them?" "Just real quick," Izuku asked, nodding toward him. Katsuki furrowed his brows, pulling the toothbrush out just slightly. "Why the hell would I do that?" he mumbled, mouth half full of toothpaste. "Because," Izuku trailed off with a small shrug, "I want to see something." Katsuki groaned like this was the worst request in the world. He reached into his back pocket, pulled out the glasses case, and popped it open with a flick of his thumb. After spitting into the sink and rinsing out his mouth with a splash of water, he turned and shoved the glasses onto his face with minimal effort. "You happy?" he said, deadpan. Izuku blinked and stared. The glasses sat just right on his face. They added something frustratingly attractive. His cheekbones looked sharper, the lines of his jaw even more defined. Despite the toothpaste foam still lingering near his mouth and his slightly tousled appearance, Katsuki looked stupidly good. Then, without missing a beat, Katsuki ripped the glasses back off and tossed them onto the desk. Come on," Izuku protested. "I didn't even get a full 5 seconds." "You got too many seconds," Katsuki muttered, grabbing a hand towel and aggressively drying his face like he could erase Izuku's expression from his brain. Izuku smirked, arms crossed. "You're just mad you looked hot." Katsuki side-eyed him, ears tinged pink. "I will throw you out the window." "You wore them for me, though," Izuku teased, voice lilting with mock sweetness. "I should have stayed in the bathroom," Katsuki grumbled, turning away before Izuku could see how much red had crept up his neck. The two made their way down the stairs into the living room, where the rest of Katsuki's crew was already gathered. On the couch sprawled a tall, lanky guy with a lazy grin and bedhead black hair. Izuku immediately pegged him as Zero. Nearby stood a girl with wild, bubblegum pink curls that bounced with every movement. Her vibrant energy practically lit up the room. Mina, obviously. As soon as they reached the bottom step, Mina zeroed in on them like a heat-seeking missile. "Oh my good, who is this cutie with you, Bakugou?" she squealed, immediately closing the distance and pinching Izuku's cheeks between her fingers with zero hesitation, like personal space was just a suggestion. Her golden eyes sparkled with curiosity and delight. Izuku stiffened, the sudden contact catching him completely off guard. His cheeks flushed deep red as he stammered for a response, eyes wide with panic. Katsuki stepped in before Izuku could even open his mouth. "These hands off, raccoon eyes," he growled, scowling so hard it could curdle milk. "Ever heard of personal space?" Mina blinked, releasing Izuku like she'd only just realized she was invading his bubble. "Oops. My bad," she laughed, stepping back with a sheepish grin. "You're just so cute I couldn't help it." Katsuki crossed his arms, jaw tight. His name's Deku, he muttered, as if that explained everything. Deku? Doesn't that mean, Mina started, brow furrowed in confused amusement. It's just some nickname he has for me, Izuku cut in quickly, scratching the back of his neck with a nervous laugh. My name's actually Izuku. Before Mina could press further, Shiro stood from the couch and wandered over, a lazy smile tugging at his lips as he approached the pair. His tall frame loomed a bit, but his casual energy softened it. He gave Izuku a quick once-over, not in a rude way, more like someone trying to figure out what kind of guy could get under Bakugou's skin. So, you're the mysterious Deku, Shiro said, sticking his hands in his hoodie pockets. Didn't think anyone could actually hang around Bakugou without getting their head bitten off. Respect. Izuku blinked, unsure if it was a compliment or a warning. Thanks. Katsuki clicked his tongue. He doesn't hang around. He's just here. Mina raised an eyebrow at Katsuki's tone, clearly unconvinced. Right. Just here. That's why you brought him downstairs like a prize. Shiro chuckled. Man, you're already getting defensive. This is gonna be fun. Katsuki shot them both a glare, but neither Mina nor Shiro seemed fazed. Izuku, meanwhile, was trying very hard not to implode from the attention. As the conversation continued, a voice called out casually from the couch. Denki leaned over the backrest, a lazy grin on his face, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Wait, this is the guy you kept talking about. He didn't get the chance to finish. Shut the hell up, dunce face. Katsuki's voice cut through the room like a blade, sharp and warning. Denki froze mid-sentence, blinking. Right? Not saying a word. He gave an exaggerated zip of his lips, though the smirk never quite left his face. Shiro raised his brows, clearly amused, while Mina's eyes sparkled with sudden interest, shifting her gaze back to Izuku. Izuku, meanwhile, stood stiff beside Katsuki, wide-eyed and slightly pink. You were talking about me? Katsuki turned his glare on him next, jaw tight. Don't flatter yourself. They just won't shut up when I mention anything. Izuku squinted up at him, trying not to smile. So you did mention me. Katsuki groaned, dragging a hand down his face. I'm going to throw all of you out the effing window. Oh yeah, why were you talking to Aizawa earlier, Shiro? Mina asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp, clearly steering the conversation somewhere else. Shiro, who had been lazily leaning against the wall, perked up a bit. Just asking him about something. Then he paused mid-thought, glancing at Izuku, then to Katsuki. There was a moment of silence, unspoken tension curling in the air like smoke. Katsuki gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't much, but it was enough. A quiet way of saying, he's good. Let him hear it. Shiro caught the signal and continued. Right. He told me to let you all know, we've got a job tonight. Be ready. The room shifted slightly. The playful energy dulled just a touch. Izuku didn't miss it. He glanced around at the others, realizing then that this wasn't just about fitting in with Katsuki. He'd have to earn all of their trust, prove that he wasn't just tagging along for the thrill. That he could actually hang in a world like this. And tonight? That might be his chance. The sun had set hours ago, casting the city in a haze of neon and shadow, exactly the kind of night this job thrived in. He'd overheard the others talking about it, a massive drag deal going down tonight, right here in the club. Two dangerous gang leaders, both known for their ruthless tactics, were facing off. Each leader would have their own crew ready to protect the deal, and things could get messy fast if they weren't careful. Izuku hadn't expected to be included. Not so soon. It felt like walking a thin line between a test and a trap, but he wasn't about to let the chance slip. If he wanted their trust, he had to earn it. They were packed into a beat-up black van that rattled with every turn. Katsuki was at the wheel, eyes sharp on the road ahead, jaw tight. The others were in the back with Izuku, seated on worn benches bolted to the sides. The interior was dim, lit only by the faint glow of streetlights slipping through the cracks in the windows. They'd gone over the plan already, twice. Shiro had mapped out the club's layout from memory, pointing out entry points and where the deal was likely to go down. Denki had slipped comms into each of their ears, small and discreet. Mina handed out ID bands to blend in with the rowdy nightlife crowd, her tone serious despite her usual charm. Their gear was subtle but effective. Concealed blades, stun devices, smoke pellets. Enough to defend and distract, not enough to start a war, unless they had to. They dressed the part, dark, fitted clothing that hugged close to their movements but passed for club fashion. Black jeans, layered tops, jackets with just enough edge. Mina's pink curls were tamed into loose waves. Shiro had tied his hair back. Even Denki managed to look sharper than usual. Izuku wore a black hoodie layered under a leather jacket, nervous hands pulling at the cuffs. The van was quiet now, the tension thick and unspoken. No one needed to repeat what was at stake. Katsuki's voice finally cut through the silence. We get in, locate the drop, stall or intercept. No hero sheet, just get it done. Clean. Izuku nodded, heart pounding, but determined. They arrived and parked the van out back, the dull hum of the club's bass already vibrating through the walls. Izuku's heart raced. This was real. Katsuki glanced at him, expression sharp and unreadable. You're with me. Back door's our entry, Katsuki said, voice low but steady. Kirishima, Mina, and the others were suited up for the job, dressed down to blend in, looking like regular clubgoers. Their mission was clear: distract the gang members. Flirt, fight, or whatever it took to draw attention away from the deal. Izuku swallowed hard. Meanwhile, he and Katsuki had one goal: stop the trade at all costs. The back door creaked open just as Katsuki keyed his comms. Entering inside. We're inside too, Kirishima's voice came through the static, barely audible over the pounding music. Izuku listened closely as Kirishima reported. 2 guards posted near the front entrance. 3 more stationed by the staircases. Staircases? Izuku's mind raced. The leaders had to be upstairs. As they moved quietly down the dim hallway, Katsuki suddenly stopped and waved Izuku over, nodding toward a shadowed staircase ahead. We're nearing the back stairs. Signal me when you're ready, Katsuki murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. A few seconds passed, the only sound in the narrow hallway being the faint thrum of music seeping through the club walls. Ready, Kirishima's voice crackled through the calm, low and steady. Katsuki's eyes flicked to Izuku, a quick glance of confirmation before he took the lead. His hand hovered near the weapon tucked at his side, shoulders tense, every step calculated. They ascended the staircase in silence, each creak of the old wood loud in the thick anticipation. Katsuki peered just over the edge of the stairwell, his sharp eyes narrowing as he spotted the 2 men at their table, clearly the dealers, judging by their guarded posture and the briefcase resting. Between them, he crouched back down, pulling his gun from its holster with a soft click, checking the magazine one last time. Deku, he murmured, voice low but firm, approached the table on the left. 2 seated. Act natural. Once you hear my shot, take the one nearest to you. Clean. Izuku gave a single nod, no hesitation. Understood. His expression shifted into something cold, professional. The casual smirk he wore earlier was gone, replaced by a sharp edge that hadn't been there before. His steps were light, steady, calculated. He moved like someone who'd done this before, not rushed, not panicked, just calm and methodical. He adjusted his jacket as he walked, blending seamlessly into the scene. His eyes scanned the area without turning his head, clocking every angle, every possible exit, and the distance between the guards and the deal. Katsuki watched him from the shadows, lips twitching into a faint smirk. Demon nerd knows what he's doing. Izuku neared the table, positioning himself exactly where he needed to be, just close enough to strike without warning. He reached into his pocket, pretending to check his phone, giving no indication that his pulse had just quickened. The sharp crack of a gunshot rang out. Izuku was already in motion. With seamless precision, he grabbed the back of the closest dealer's neck and slammed his head against the table, hard enough to crack the surface and knock the man out cold in one fluid movement. Before the second man could even process what happened, Katsuki's shot found its mark, a clean bullet between the eyes. No time for a scream. No time to draw a weapon. The silence that followed was sharp, tense. Then the low static of Katsuki's voice crackled through the comms. Targets down. Briefcase secured. Izuku wiped his hand on his coat, unfazed, before crouching down to check the unconscious man's pockets for weapons or any intel. A pistol. Burner phone. A folded piece of paper with coded numbers. I've got something, he muttered to Katsuki, holding it up as he stood. Might be coordinates. Or a transaction log. Katsuki grabbed the briefcase, flipping it open just long enough to confirm what they were dealing with: stacks of vacuum-sealed bags filled with crystalline powder. Enough to ruin a whole neighborhood. A loud voice suddenly blared through the comms. Denkis, slightly panicked but controlled. Backups on the move. 2 headed your way. Fes. Might be more. Katsuki growled under his breath, eyes flicking to the hallway. Time to move. Izuku didn't need to be told twice. He already had the unconscious dealer slung over his shoulder, dragging him toward the exit. Katsuki followed close behind, the briefcase in one hand, his gun still drawn in the other, every step practiced, every movement razor-sharp. But as soon as they shoved open the back exit, 4 gang members rounded the corner in perfect sync, blocking their way. Armed, broad-shouldered, and furious. Well, shit, one of them barked, a tall guy with a crooked nose and silver chains wrapped around both fists. Didn't think the rats would be dumb enough to try and sneak out the back. The shortest one sneered, stepping forward and cracking his knuckles. I call dibs on the green-haired one. He looked soft. Katsuki shifted forward instinctively, but Izuku threw out an arm to stop him, his grip firm. Kaken, he said, voice low. Go. I got this. The blonde opened his mouth to argue, something defiant already forming, but paused when he met Izuku's eyes. There was no hesitation in his stare. Just steal. All right. Katsuki nodded once, sharp and reluctant, before slipping past the edge of the wall and disappearing into the shadows with the briefcase. The tallest gang member spat on the floor. What, you think you're some kind of hero? 4 of us, 1 of you. Izuku rolled his shoulder and dropped the unconscious man to the ground with a soft thud. No, he said, calm and collected. I just don't like sharing. They lunged. Izuku moved like water. Swift, seamless, controlled. The first guy reached him with a raised pipe, only for Izuku to duck low, driving his elbow into the man's ribs, then twisting around to deliver a sharp strike to the back of the knee. The man crumpled instantly. The second charged with a growl. Izuku spun, caught his wrist mid-swing, and slammed his head into the wall hard enough to leave a dent. 2, Izuku muttered, not even winded. The last 2 hesitated, but not for long. They rushed him together. Bad idea. Izuku pivoted, used one's momentum to flip him over his shoulder and straight into the other. The 2 slammed into the concrete in a tangled heap, groaning and unconscious before they hit the floor. He let out a slow breath. For down. Not one scratch on him. Izuku stood in the hallway, barely winded, the flickering overhead lights catching the faint sheen of sweat on his brow. He rolled his neck once, then adjusted the sleeves of his jacket with a calm, practiced tug. Soft, huh? He muttered under his breath, shaking his head with a dry scoff. One of the men had collapsed too close, his limp arms sprawled across Izuku's boot. Without even glancing down, Izuku lifted his foot and kicked the arm off, smooth and careless, like brushing away debris. Then, wordlessly, he crouched beside the unconscious leader, now nothing more than dead weight, and hauled him up over his shoulder with a grunt. Let's get moving, he said to no one in particular, already turning back toward the path Katsuki had taken. Silence followed. Only the creak of his boots echoed behind him as he walked, leaving nothing but a pile of broken bodies in his wake. Izuku pushed through the back door, the weight of the unconscious leader still slung over his shoulder. The cool night air hit his face, a welcome contrast to the heat of the fight he'd just walked out of. His boots crunched against gravel as he made his way toward the black van parked under the shadow of a flickering street lamp. Katsuki was already there, leaning casually against the side of the vehicle, arms crossed, one boot propped up behind him against the metal. He looked like he'd been waiting for a while, but his expression didn't show impatience, just sharp-eyed focus. His gaze snapped to Izuku the moment the freckled male stepped into view. Took your demon time, Katsuki muttered, his tone neutral but his eyes scanning Izuku's frame, checking for blood, bruises, a limp. There were none. Izuku dropped the body into the back of the van with a heavy thud, dusting his hands off as he turned toward the blonde. I was sightseeing, he replied dryly. Katsuki huffed a laugh, shaking his head as he stepped forward and yanked the van door closed. You're a menace. Izuku gave a slight smirk. So I've been told. The rest of the crew sat scattered inside the van, all eyes locked on Izuku the moment he climbed in. The weight of their stares made his skin prick. Guys? Izuku cleared his throat, forcing a nervous chuckle. Is there something on my face? Or? Kirishima blinked, then broke into a wide grin. Dude, you just took down 4 of our guys by yourself, no scratches, no bruises, nothing. You expect us not to be a little starstruck? Denki snickered from the back, elbowing Kirishima playfully. Yeah man, you're on another level. Izuku swallowed, trying to hide the small swell of pride creeping up inside him. It wasn't every day he got this kind of recognition, especially from a crew like this. Oh, thank you. Guys, Izuku muttered, rubbing the back of his neck as a sheepish smile tugged at his lips. I could do that 100 times better, Katsuki barked from the driver's seat, arms crossed, mouth curled into a scowl that didn't quite reach his eyes. Izuku looked over at Katsuki, eyes narrowing with a glare. I'd like to see you try. Oh yeah. Katsuki shot back, one hand still on the wheel as he met Izuku's eyes in the rearview mirror, a smirk playing at his lips. You want to go that way, Deku? There was a beat of silence. The tension in the van spiked instantly. Denki blinked. Oh. Kirishima leaned back in his seat slowly. Here we go. Mina, perched near the back, whispered under her breath, $5 says they're either gonna fight or kiss by the end of the week. Nobody responded. Everyone was too focused on the 2 stubborn men locked in an invisible standoff, one smirking, the other scowling. Izuku crossed his arms, still glaring. Maybe I do. Katsuki just scoffed, eyes flicking back to the front as he started the engine with a low rumble. Careful what you wish for. The van lurched forward smoothly as he pulled out of the alley, tires crunching against the gravel. The city lights blurred past the windows, casting moving shadows across the inside of the vehicle. No one said much after that, the tension between Katsuki and Izuku still thick in the air. Izuku shifted in his seat, arms still crossed, trying not to glance at the mirror again. But he could feel Katsuki's eyes on him every few seconds. That smug, silent challenge. The rest of the crew exchanged side glances, pretending to focus on the view outside, the drive, anything but the charged silence. Eventually, Kirishima cleared his throat. So, anyone hungry? Denki jumped on it. Yes, boys. Feed me. Can we not talk about food while there's still a body in the back? Mina chimed in, scrunching her nose. Izuku shot a glance behind him at the unconscious gang leader, still out cold, slumped and tied up near the very back. Yeah, definitely kills the appetite, he muttered. Katsuki snorted softly from the driver's seat. You're all soft. And you're all ego, Izuku fired back without missing a beat. Another beat of silence. Then Kirishima grinned, leaning back in his seat. God, you two are going to kill each other. Katsuki didn't deny it. He just kept driving, the cityscape slowly fading into the quieter outskirts as the van made its way back to their hideout. And through the mirror, his eyes met Izuku's one more time. Neither of them looked away. Katsuki parked to the side of the warehouse, killing the engine with a sharp twist of the keys. The van hummed down to silence, save for the creak of metal settling. Without a word, Katsuki shoved the door open and stepped out, boots hitting the gravel with a solid thud. The rest of the crew followed suit, Denki grumbling about how his legs were asleep, Mina stretching with a loud yawn, Kirishima casually cracking his neck as he hopped out behind them, while Shiro slid out of the back, expression cool and unreadable. Izuku was the last to slide out, his eyes flicking up toward the looming warehouse. It looked even bigger now under the pale glow of the overhead lights. Still holding the dead weight of their target slung over one shoulder, He adjusted his grip before slamming the door shut behind him. They all made their way toward the first gate, offering Leonardo a quick nod or muttered, "Ciao," in passing. Izuku, despite the dead weight slung over his shoulder, simply gave the man a sheepish smile, like he wasn't lugging around an unconscious body at all. Eventually, they reached the front door. Katsuki was already ahead, punching in the security code like muscle memory. The keypad gave a soft buzz, and the door clicked open. Katsuki held it there with his boot, jerking his chin for the others to go in. He stopped Izuku with a glance. "Give me the guy." Izuku huffed. "You think I need help?" "I wasn't asking." Katsuki didn't wait for a response. He stepped forward and pulled the body off Izuku's shoulders with practiced ease, hoisting it over his own like it was nothing. Izuku blinked, biting back a comment. The two stepped in last, the heavy door sealing shut behind them. "Kaken," Izuku said low, moving in close so only the blonde could hear, "why did we even bring this guy back again?" Katsuki snorted, actually snorted. "Beats me." Izuku stared at him, incredulous. "Are you serious? You're telling me we dragged a whole grown man across town for nothing?" Katsuki shrugged, completely unbothered. Felt like the thing to do. Izuku groaned under his breath, rubbing his face with one hand. "You're unbelievable." Yeah. Katsuki smirked. "You'll live." He walked off with the body slung over his shoulder, boots thudding heavily against the steps as he made his way upstairs. Izuku didn't hesitate to follow, quickly catching up. "Where are we going?" Izuku asked, jogging a bit to walk beside the blonde. Katsuki sighed, not bothering to look at him. "Aizawa's so-called office." Izuku raised a brow at that, catching the sarcastic tone. "Why'd you say it like that?" Katsuki just scoffed under his breath, like the answer was obvious. "You'll see." They reached the final door at the end of the hall. Katsuki didn't pause, didn't knock. He simply shoved it open with his foot. "Would it kill you to knock?" Aizawa's voice stopped cold as he turned around, gaze landing on the unconscious man over Katsuki's shoulder. His eyes narrowed, darting between the two of them. Katsuki stepped inside. "Special DLVOY," he said dryly. Aizawa exhaled. Through his nose, unimpressed. "You were supposed to eliminate him, not bring him back." Izuku, still at the door, scratched the back of his neck. "Yeah, that's on me." Aizawa's eyes shifted to him. "You hit him." Clean shot to the temple. He went down like a sack of bricks. Izuku glanced toward the limp figure. Didn't really think about what to do after that. Katsuki grunted, letting the man fall from his shoulder with a dull thud onto the floor. "Figures," Aizawa muttered, crouching to check the guy's pulse. "He's alive for now." Katsuki crossed his arms. "Interrogate him while we've got the chance." Izuku's eyes scanned the room, bare walls, flickering overhead light, a desk half buried in paperwork and wires. "This is your office?" he asked, incredulous. Katsuki side-eyed him with a smug grin. "Told you." Aizawa rose slowly, shooting Katsuki a dry look. "It's not supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to get results." Izuku leaned back against the doorframe. "Guess I'll have to get used to how you guys operate." Aizawa met his eyes, voice low but steady. "You're here now, aren't you?" Izuku didn't answer, but the silence between them seemed to confirm it. Aizawa's eyes lingered on the unconscious man sprawled on the floor, then slowly lifted to Izuku. Something unreadable crossed his expression, measured, thoughtful, like he was sizing him up. "You fought 4 guys and walked away without a scratch," he said, tone low and clipped. "That takes control." Izuku blinked. Thanks." Aizawa stepped closer, folding his arms. "You're not just muscle. You're calculated. You don't waste energy. You see the bigger picture." "So," his eyes sharpened. "Why don't you interrogate him, Izuku?" The room seemed to go still. "Me?" Izuku's voice cracked slightly, his throat tightening. "You want me to?" "You knocked him out. You earned the right to ask the questions," Aizawa said flatly, no room for argument in his tone. Katsuki didn't say anything. He just raised a brow, watching Izuku out of the corner of his eye. Izuku swallowed hard. He didn't know why he agreed, maybe to prove something, maybe because everyone was watching, but there was no backing out now. "All right, sure," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The warehouse's basement wasn't somewhere Izuku expected to go, but Aizawa led him down a narrow staircase tucked behind a locked door. The air grew colder with every step, and the lighting dimmed to an eerie flicker of exposed bulbs. The walls were thick, cement-reinforced, and the hallway dead-ended into a metal door that groaned when Aizawa opened it. Inside was a room stripped of comfort, of humanity. Concrete floors, stained in places. Chains hanging from the walls. An old table lined with tools that had no business outside a hospital or a war zone. A single chair sat in the center of the room, metal, bolted down, with the unconscious man now tied securely to it. Thick rope wound around his arms and torso, ankles bound, and a strip of duct tape stretched across his mouth. He was awake now, blinking up at the ceiling in confusion, until he spotted Izuku. The green-haired male stepped into the room, a knife in hand, the glint of it catching the dull light overhead. He hadn't picked the biggest one, just the right one, small, sharp, quick. The gang member flinched, trying to JRK away, but the restraints held firm. Izuku stood over him, gaze unreadable. There was no hesitation in his step, no stutter in his breath. Behind him, Aizawa leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Katsuki leaned against the opposite side of the doorframe, watching with something between scrutiny and interest. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared at Izuku like he was seeing something shift inside him. "Remember," Aizawa said quietly, "we want information. Don't kill him unless you have to." Izuku gave the faintest nod. He stepped forward, the low light casting shadows across the sharp edge of the blade glinting in his hand. Izuku stopped in front of the man, bound to a chair, wrists and ankles raw from how hard he'd tried to escape earlier. His face was pale, damp with sweat, his chest rising and falling in shallow, panicked breaths. Izuku's boots came to a stop just inches away. He didn't say a word as he leaned forward and ripped the duct tape from the man's mouth with one swift, brutal motion. The man yelped, a raw sound that barely made it out before the cold edge of a knife pressed gently, deliberately, to the curve of his neck. "Easy," Izuku said, voice calm. "Quiet. Deadly. I'm not here to kill you. Not yet." He offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It wasn't warm, wasn't reassuring. It was clinical. Inevitable. "I just want answers," he continued, his voice soft, almost kind. "That's all." The man stared up at him, lips quivering, sweat dripping down his temples. His eyes were wide, not just with fear, but with the realization that the freckled boy in front of him wasn't bluffing. Izuku tilted his head slightly, reading that fear like a book. He took the silence as permission to move forward. "What's your crew's next move?" he asked calmly, his tone almost bored, like it was just routine. Like this man bleeding in front of him was just another box to check off a list. His eyes, though, didn't meet the man's. Instead, they were fixed on the blade, the faint red line already drawn across his captive's skin, catching the light like it was something beautiful. Something alive. He hummed quietly, as if admiring the craftsmanship of the knife itself. Or maybe just weighing how much pressure it would take to draw more blood. The knife pressed in ever so slightly, enough for the man to flinch. Izuku finally flicked his gaze up, calm and unblinking. "I asked you a question," he said, not raising his voice, but stripping it of any warmth. Still, no answer. A quiet second passed, just long enough for the room to feel like it had stopped breathing, and then Izuku moved. Quick, precise, and unforgiving. The knife slashed down in a clean, practiced line across the man's thigh, not deep enough to sever anything important, but plenty to make him scream. Blood welled up instantly, dark and hot, soaking through the torn fabric of his pants. The scream bounced off the concrete walls, raw and ragged. Izuku didn't flinch. He wiped the blade on the man's own shirt, then brought it back to his neck with steady, terrifying ease. "I'll ask one more time," Izuku said, voice quiet as a whisper now. "What's your crew's next move?" The man whimpered, entire body trembling. His face had gone ghost white, and fresh sweat rolled down his temples. Tuesday, he sobbed. Tuesday night, the docks, shipping containers 6B. I swear, that's all I know. Izuku leaned in just slightly, the knife still hovering by his throat. You sure? He asked, voice lower now. Dangerous? Because I'm in a really bad mood tonight. The man shook his head furiously. I'm sure. I'm sure. Please. Behind Izuku, Katsuki didn't say a word, arms crossed, his expression unreadable but his eyes burning with a fierce sort of approval. Aizawa watched closely, one brow raised. Well, he said dryly. That worked. Izuku finally stood upright and slid the blade back into its sheath. I'm done here, he muttered, stepping away from the chair. And the man, still shaking, flinched as if he'd been punched just by Izuku's shadow passing him. Izuku simply smiled to himself as he stepped away from the trembling man, satisfaction written all over his face. He's all yours, he said over his shoulder, casting one last glance at the wreck of a man slumped in the chair. Aizawa gave him a subtle nod of approval, his gaze lingering on Izuku a second longer than usual. All right, you two head back upstairs, he instructed, already moving toward the prisoner. Bakugo makes sure he gets cleaned up. They walked in silence for a moment, the echo of their footsteps bouncing off the concrete walls. Then Katsuki snorted quietly, hands shoved in his pockets. Guy's lucky, he muttered with a smirk. Getting interrogated by you? She'd probably his K&K. Wet dream if you ask me. Izuku shot him a deadpan glare, his cheeks flushing just slightly despite himself. You're disgusting. Tee, says the guy who made a grown man cry with 3 words and a pocket knife. Izuku rolled his eyes. Still disgusting. Whatever helps you sleep at night, sunshine. Katsuki fired back, shoving his hands in his pockets as they reached the top of the stairs. The two made their way to Katsuki's washroom in silence, the cool tile underfoot contrasting the warmth that still buzzed beneath Izuku's skin. Katsuki had a damp washcloth in hand, wrung out and steaming slightly. I could just do this myself, you know, Izuku muttered, his arms crossed defensively across his chest. Shut the hell up, Katsuki shot back without missing a beat, his tone flat but not unkind. He stepped in close, eyes narrowing as he scanned Izuku's face. Idiot. You've got blood on your cheek and all over your diamond shirt. Before Izuku could protest again, Katsuki reached up and grabbed his chin, fingers rough but careful as he tilted Izuku's face toward the light. The cloth was warm when it touched his skin, Katsuki dragging it across the smudge on his cheek with a practiced touch. Izuku blinked, caught slightly off guard by the gentleness beneath the usual bark. He stood still, barely breathing, the faint scent of Katsuki's cologne and gunpowder wrapping around him. Katsuki's brows were furrowed in concentration, lips pressed together like he was trying to pretend this wasn't anything. How the hell did you get this much blood on you anyway? You butcher him off-screen or something? Maybe I got artistic with it, Izuku muttered, a weak smirk threatening to surface. Katsuki huffed through his nose. Psycho. He wiped the last of the blood away, but didn't immediately drop his hand. For a beat too long, his fingers lingered on Izuku's jaw, then he pulled back like nothing had happened. Shirt's ruined. Take it off, there's spare clothes in the drawer. Izuku raised a brow. You just happen to keep extra clothes in your bathroom? For idiots who get blood all over themselves? Yeah, apparently I do now, Katsuki snapped, already turning toward the cabinet. Here. Just toss your shirt in my laundry basket afterward or do whatever with it. I don't care. Katsuki tossed a clean shirt at him without looking up, then strode out of the bathroom, shutting the door behind him. Izuku let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. For once, Katsuki's rough edge softened, just a fraction. It caught him off guard, made his heart skip for a moment. Damn it. He cursed himself quietly, peeling off the bloodied shirt and pulling on the fresh one. It still carried that faint scent of Katsuki, sharp, spicy, and undeniably his. Stepping out, Izuku found Katsuki already leaning against the wall by the door, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened. Took you long enough, Katsuki said, eyes flicking up to meet his. He slipped the phone into his pocket with a casual smirk. Izuku didn't say a word, just trailed silently behind Katsuki as they headed out of the room. You want dinner? Katsuki asked, his voice casual but carrying that unmistakable edge of command as they made their way down the stairs. Now that Izuku thought about it, he hadn't eaten all day. Sure. Why not? Katsuki cracked a grin. Get ready. This'll be the best diamond cooking you've ever tasted. The rest of the crew lounged in the living room. Mina's eyes snapped to the two as they entered, clearly waiting on them. Finally. I'm starving, she groaned, marching straight over to Katsuki. Start dinner or else. She jabbed a finger threateningly toward his face. Katsuki snarled, swatting her finger away with a quick, rough motion. I'll starve you all if you don't get that finger out of my face. Izuku followed Katsuki into the kitchen and settled onto the empty counter, watching the blonde move with purpose. Why are you the designated cook anyway? He asked, curious. Katsuki shrugged without looking up. Because none of them can cook to save their lives. And like I said, you're about to taste the best food you've ever had. Izuku raised an eyebrow but smiled faintly, already wondering what that would actually taste like. The freckled male hopped off the counter and made his way to the living room, sliding down beside Mina. Hey, he greeted quietly. Well, hello to you, Izuku. Mina beamed, then leaned in closer, resting a hand lightly on his shoulder. So, what's the deal with you and Bakugou? Izuku blinked, caught off guard by the sudden question. We're just friends. Nothing more. Kirishima, who had been nearby, overheard and smirked. Really? I find that hard to believe. Yeah, Denki chimed in with a grin, mimicking a tiny explosion with his hands. You guys just scream couple. He even lets you near the kitchen, Siro added, finally looking up from his phone. I think he almost tore an arm off me when I tried to get close while he was cooking. Exactly. And he's been way different since you showed up, Mina agreed with a knowing smile. Izuku felt his cheeks heat up, unsure of how to respond. He just seems normal to me, he said, scratching the back of his neck nervously. Denki giggled. You should see the way he looks at you. The others nodded, smirking in agreement. The way he looks at me? Izuku's mind raced. There's no way Katsuki likes me. That's crazy. They'd only known each other for a couple of weeks, and aside from a few rare flirty comments, the blonde had made it clear he'd never had anything close to a real relationship. Mina nudged him with her elbow. Izuku, you're mumbling. Heat rushed to his cheeks, and he glanced away. Oh, sorry. That's embarrassing. I wonder if Bakugou's noticed it, she teased with a wink, her voice light and playful. Izuku's face burned even hotter. Alright, idiots. Dinner's ready, Katsuki called from the kitchen, voice sharp but unmistakably proud. The room practically exploded with movement as the rest of the crew scrambled to their feet and rushed toward the kitchen like a stampede. Izuku followed behind at a calmer pace, though his curiosity was piqued. When he stepped into the kitchen and saw what Katsuki had made, his eyes widened slightly. Katsudon? He asked, a sheepish but genuine smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Katsuki gave a nonchalant shrug. Sure is. He didn't even seem to notice the way Izuku lit up at the sight. You some kind of mind reader or something? Izuku asked as he picked up one of the perfectly plated bowls. I love katsudon. He took a bite and instantly froze mid-chew, his eyes practically sparkling. Holy sheet, he mumbled through a full mouth. This is amazing. Katsuki rolled his eyes and crossed his arms, trying to suppress the smirk pulling at his lips. Told you. The rest of the crew had already started grabbing their plates, forming a chaotic but familiar line around the counter. Mina let out a dramatic gasp as she tasted hers. Katsuki, what the hell? This is insane, she groaned with delight, already digging in for more. No way you made this from scratch, Denki added, halfway through his bowl. Dude, I'd marry this meal, Kirishima said with a grin, shoveling more into his mouth. Siro raised his eyebrows, nodding in agreement as he chewed. Okay, yeah, I take back every complaint I've ever made about your attitude. Katsuki just scoffed. Shut up and eat. Izuku chuckled softly to himself, still savoring the taste. He really meant it when he said it'd be the best cooking I'd ever have. He glanced over at the blonde as the group sat down around the kitchen island, chaotic chatter filling the air once more. Katsuki didn't say anything, just leaned against the counter with his own plate, eating quietly. Maybe he's more thoughtful than he lets on, Izuku thought, eyes lingering for just a second longer than he meant to. Then he took another bite, letting the warmth of the food and the moment sink in. Can't believe I doubted you for a second, Izuku said with a low laugh, glancing over at Katsuki. The blonde snorted, not missing a beat. You doubted me? Titus. Izuku shook his head, grinning. I think you would too if I walked around with an ego as big as yours. I don't have an ego, Katsuki shot back, even throwing up sarcastic air quotes. I'm just great at everything. Can't help it if the truth sounds cocky. Izuku raised a brow, amused. So modest. Katsuki smirked, taking another bite. DMN right. So, Siro began, raising a curious brow as he leaned against the table. How'd you guys meet? In a cafe. Both Katsuki and Izuku replied at the exact same time. Their eyes met for a second, brief, surprised, before flicking away just as fast. Ooh, said that in sync. Denki grinned, nudging Mina. Cute, she whispered, just loud enough for Izuku to hear. His ears flushed pink. The room fell quiet for a moment, everyone suddenly a little more tuned in. Siro trailed off, narrowing his eyes slightly as if expecting more. He wasn't buying the simplicity of it. But Kirishima, sitting back with his arms crossed and a slight smirk on his face, didn't look all that interested. He just shrugged, like it wasn't news to him. Yeah. He told me already. Oh, so you get the full story, huh? Mina teased, leaning in toward Kirishima. Kirishima chuckled. Not my fault Bakugou actually talks to me. Shut it, Katsuki snapped, scowling half-heartedly. Denki whistled. What I want to know is, what kind of cafe run-in ends with you two working together in the same gang? Did you spill coffee on him or something? Mina asked Izuku, clearly not letting up. Something like that, Izuku mumbled, suddenly very focused on his katsudon. Katsuki rolled his eyes. More like he just wouldn't leave me alone. Izuku narrowed his eyes. You asked for my number first, Bakugou. The room erupted into laughter. Katsuki looked like he wanted to slam his head against the table, but the corner of his mouth twitched like he was holding back a grin. Anyway, Kirishima cut in with a knowing look, they've been stuck like glue since. Whatever, the blonde groaned, setting his empty plate in the sink with a soft clatter. Just another extra added to my list. And for some reason, Izuku's heart dropped. Just a second, just a flicker, but it hit deep. But he wasn't sure. Mina scoffed dramatically, arms crossed. Right, just another extra? I don't think any of us believe that. Katsuki shot her a glare, sharp, quiet, loaded. He didn't say a word, but the intensity of his stare said watch it. Just set your DMN plate in the sink when you're done, he barked, looking away. Mina wasn't fazed. She leaned closer to Izuku, her voice hushed but smug. He didn't deny it, she whispered into his ear, making Izuku glance at her in surprise, only to see her wink and strut off. It was past 12 a.m. now. The others had long vanished into their rooms or the lounge, leaving only Katsuki and Izuku behind in the kitchen. Izuku stood by the sink, arms buried up to the elbows in soapy water. Katsuki leaned against the counter nearby, drying dishes with a towel. The soft clink of ceramic and the occasional drip from the faucet were the only sounds between them, until Katsuki broke the silence. Was I right? He asked, smug as ever. Best cooking you ever tasted? He nudged Izuku's side with a cocky smirk. Izuku laughed, shaking his head. Yeah, you were right. He paused, smiling as he stared at the bubbles clinging to the dish in his. Kaken makes the best katsudon, he muttered softly, but just loud enough for Katsuki to catch. The blonde turned his head quickly, like he didn't want Izuku to see whatever reaction flickered across his face. Whatever, he muttered, voice low as he turned back around. Izuku giggled under his breath and handed him another bowl. But then an idea sparked. He reached back into the sink with both hands and scooped up a pile of suds, glancing at Katsuki from the corner of his eye. "What are you?" Before Katsuki could finish, Izuku turned and flung a handful of soap bubbles straight at him. It hit him square in the chest, foamy residue clinging to his shirt. Katsuki blinked. "You little sheet," he said, voice flat, but he was already reaching toward the sink. Izuku laughed, really laughed, as he dodged to the side. "Oh no, don't you even." But it was too late. A splash of bubbles smacked him in the shoulder. And it was war. They both broke into chaotic laughter as suds flew through the air, Katsuki throwing with precision, Izuku flinging blindly while dodging behind chairs and the fridge. Dishes clinked dangerously close to falling, but neither seemed to care. Soap streaked Katsuki's cheek. Izuku had foam in his curls. It was stupid. Messy. And it made Izuku's chest feel light in a way he didn't expect. Finally, Katsuki caught Izuku around the waist, dragging him close as he shoved a handful of bubbles right into the center of his face. Izuku gasped and spluttered through his laughter, blindly pawing at him. "Kaken! Say it!" Katsuki growled between wheezes of laughter. "Say I'm the best cook you know." "You already know you are." Izuku choked out, face flushed red with amusement and embarrassment. Katsuki loosened his grip, the two of them panting as the laughter slowly faded. There was a long pause, both of them still close, almost too close. "Idiot," Katsuki muttered, but there was no heat behind it. Izuku looked up at him, eyes bright. "Takes one to know one." The silence between them felt warm now, not awkward, not tense. Familiar. And in that moment, standing in a kitchen covered in soap suds and damp towels, it felt like something had shifted. Even if neither of them would say it yet. After finishing up with the dishes, and wiping the last of the soap bubbles from their arms, the two headed upstairs. The hallway was dim, quiet, but somehow the silence between them wasn't awkward. Instead, that same familiar, electric feeling buzzed between them, quiet but undeniable. They stopped in front of Katsuki's room. "You gonna stay?" Katsuki asked, voice low. But it didn't come out with the usual snarl or sarcasm that Izuku had grown used to. It was tentative. Barely a question. Like he was trying not to care too much, but failing. Izuku glanced at him, brow raised, lips twitching into something close to a smile. "You want me to?" Katsuki let out a huff, glancing away for a moment. He bit the inside of his cheek like he was holding something back, jaw tense as his eyes flicked up to meet Izuku's again. There was something in his stare sharp and searching, like he could see straight through him. "It's up to you, Deku," he muttered, trying to keep his cool. But Izuku didn't budge. "Well, yes," Katsuki cut in abruptly. His voice was rough, but quiet. "Honest. I want you to stay, damn it." For a second, neither of them moved. The words hung between them like a wire pulled taut, tense, fragile, real. Izuku's heart did a stupid flip in his chest. He swallowed, lips twitching into a softer smile this time. "Alright, then I'll stay." Katsuki gave him a quick nod and pushed the door open, stepping inside. Izuku followed, the room dimly lit by the bedside lamp Katsuki had left on earlier. The blonde rifled through his drawer before pulling out a black headband. "I'm gonna take a shower." "Do whatever you want," he muttered, slipping the band over his head and pushing his hair back. As he turned, the overhead light caught on something, metal glinting at the edge of his brow. Izuku blinked. "Wait, hold on. You have an eyebrow piercing?" he asked, brows shooting up in surprise. "How the hell did I not notice that before?" Katsuki paused in the doorway, turning just enough to flash him a smirk over his shoulder. "Yeah, I do." The grin he wore was lazy, a little cocky, but Izuku swore there was a flicker of something else beneath it. Amusement, maybe. Or curiosity at Izuku's reaction. "I guess you've been too busy staring at other things," Katsuki added teasingly, before disappearing into the washroom. Izuku sat there for a second, completely thrown. He blinked once. Then twice. "Why, that's not." He stopped himself, face heating, as he flopped backward onto the bed with a groan. Good. He was not winning tonight. The bathroom door creaked open, steam drifting out as Katsuki stepped into the room, towel slung around his neck and his skin still dewy from washing up. Izuku barely looked up from his phone, lounging across the bed like he owned it. Finally, he groaned dramatically, dropping his phone beside him as he sat up. What were you doing in there, waterboarding yourself? Katsuki snorted, running a hand through his damp hair. Say shit like that in front of anyone else, and they'll start wondering if you need to be on a watch list. Izuku grinned, unfazed. Yeah, but lucky for me, you're used to crazy. Used to you anyway, Katsuki muttered, but there was no bite behind it, only a trace of something fond in his voice as he crossed the room. What was that? Izuku asked, even though he'd heard him loud and clear. Katsuki didn't miss a beat. He huffed and bent down slightly, bringing himself closer to Izuku's face. You heard me. Izuku blinked up at him, lips parted, but no words came out. His brain stuttered under the weight of those 3 simple words, heart thudding hard enough he was sure Katsuki could hear it too. The blonde just rolled his eyes, smirking. If you're staying, put on something else. Who the hell wears a hoodie and jeans to bed? You sleep like that, you're the real maniac. Izuku let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, still trying to catch up. Right? He finally said, voice a bit breathless. Katsuki straightened, clearly satisfied with the effect he'd left behind. Drawers open. Pick something and don't take a DMN year. The blonde said, standing up. It felt almost surreal, being this close to Katsuki. Barely a month had passed since they met, yet here Izuku was, standing in the middle of the blonde's room, debating. Sleeping arrangements like this was all completely normal. They had argued about it for a solid 10 minutes. Voices were raised, pride was wounded, and yet, neither of them seemed truly mad, just stubborn. I'll sleep on the floor, Izuku finally said with a sigh, cracking his neck and stretching his joints. I'm used to it anyway. Katsuki scoffed from where he stood by the bed, arms crossed. Go ahead. Izuku blinked. You're not even gonna offer the bed? The blonde let out a sharp laugh, one corner of his mouth tugging up into a smirk. Who the hell do you take me for? A gentleman? Izuku narrowed his eyes, crossing his arms in return. Sorry, I forgot chivalry dies when you're too busy kissing your own reflection. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Fine. Take the DMN bed, princess. But Izuku hesitated. Wano. I can't let you sleep on the floor. That's not fair. A sharp groan escaped the blonde as he ran a hand down his face, clearly at the end of his patience. We share the bed then. God, you can't make up your DMN mind. There was a pause, then Izuku slowly nodded. Okay, fine. Good, Katsuki muttered, already yanking back the covers and flopping onto one side, facing the wall. But if you touch me in your sleep, I'll kill you. Izuku chuckled softly as he climbed in beside him. Yeah, I'll try not to dream about you. He meant it as a joke, mostly. But he caught the way Katsuki's shoulders tensed for a brief second before settling. They laid there, back to back, the space between them heavy with everything unsaid. And even in the silence, Izuku's heart wouldn't calm. Despite everything, he couldn't figure out why. 6 a.m. sharp. The room was still dim, tinted in the bluish-gray of early morning. Katsuki's eyes blinked open, his body unusually warm, and not just from the blanket. He looked down. Izuku was practically glued to him. Arms wrapped around Katsuki's waist, legs tangled with his under the sheets, and his head tucked right into the crook of his neck, soft breaths brushing against his skin. Holy shit! Katsuki froze, his brain short-circuiting as his heart thudded against his ribcage. He could feel the heat creeping up his neck, bleeding into his ears, his face, everywhere. And worse, a certain reaction beneath the sheets that he absolutely refused to acknowledge. Hey hell, he muttered, very quietly, biting the inside of his cheek. He slowly began to move, careful and precise, like he was defusing a bomb. He pried Izuku's arm off his waist, gently untangled their legs, and shifted himself just enough to slide out from under him, making sure not to wake him. Dumb nerd, he muttered under his breath, standing beside the bed with a hand over his face, trying to will the fluster away. I told him not to touch me. Yet somehow, the warmth still lingered on his skin. And DMN it, he didn't hate it. The tips of his ears burned a bright pink as he turned away, raking a hand through his hair in frustration. He caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror, face red, expression caught between mortified and confused. "Never speaking of this," he grumbled, walking off to the bathroom like nothing had happened. And if his lips twitched slightly into a smile as he closed the door behind him, that was no one's business but his own. Izuku blinked awake, squinting at the red digits glowing on the bedside clock. 8:30 a.m. Katsuki was gone, no surprise there. The guy probably woke up at dawn, did a workout and punched a wall or two for fun. He yawned, dragging himself upright, stretching until his shoulders popped. Still half asleep, he grabbed the same clothes from yesterday, slipping them on without much thought. Comfort bead med. The freckled male trudged into Katsuki's bathroom, flipping on the light. The mirror wasn't kind. His hair looked like a bird's nest that had survived a thunderstorm, tangled, flattened in some spots, frizzed in others. "Jesus," he muttered, wetting his hands under the faucet and running them through his curls in a desperate attempt to tame them. It helped. Barely. He ran his fingers under his eyes, sighed, and turned off the light. When Izuku stepped out, he nearly jumped. Katsuki was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes fixed on him like he'd been standing there for a while. His expression was unreadable, except for the hint of impatience in the tap of his finger against his bicep. "About time. We've got another job," Katsuki said flatly. Izuku blinked. "Another already?" "Continuation of the last one." Katsuki pushed off the doorframe, already heading downstairs. "You remember, right? That's when it hit him." "Right. Tuesday. I swear Tuesday night, the docks, shipping containers 6B. The man's panicked voice rang in his memory like a warning bell. Izuku's stomach twisted. It was Tuesday. Oh shit. He quickened his pace to match the blonde. Yeah, I remember." Katsuki gave him a sharp look over his shoulder. "Then quit dragging your feet. We've got some smug BSRDS to intercept before nightfall." The rest of the day passed in a blur of quiet planning and easy silence. Aizawa had laid everything out, who was going where, what to expect, and what to do if things went sideways. It was clean, efficient. After that, things settled into something slower, comfortable, even. Katsuki and Izuku found themselves sprawled on opposite ends of the couch, the usual half-hearted insults thrown back and forth like muscle memory. It was their version of peace. "Kaken," Izuku mumbled, glancing away from the TV. "Do I mumble?" Katsuki turned his head toward him, blinking like he hadn't heard the question right. "You do. Usually when you're overthinking every goddamn thing. Or just thinking." His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was reading off a checklist. Izuku raised a brow, shifting on the couch. "And you've never said anything about it?" For a split second, Katsuki looked like someone had hit him in the chest. His eye twitched. I don't pay attention to you." It sounded rehearsed. Izuku tilted his head. "But you just said you knew when it happens. That means you do pay attention." A beat passed. "I'll kill you," Katsuki muttered through gritted teeth. No bite. No heat. Just an empty threat dressed in irritation and embarrassment. Izuku held back a grin. "What?" "I'm just asking," he said, hands raised in mock defense, though he knew exactly what he was doing. Mina had gotten in his head earlier. Now he wanted to know, did Katsuki notice? Did it bother him? Or was there a reason he let it slide? "Shut up." Katsuki snapped, shooting him the filthiest glare he could muster. "It's time to get ready for the job. Stop asking stupid questions." Changing the subject. "All right, sorry, Kaken," Izuku said, dragging out the nickname just to needle him. He bit his lip, standing up from the couch with a sigh. No use pushing further. Not when the guy was this stubborn. He might as well just go get ready. Even if Katsuki would never admit it, that little detail, knowing when and why Izuku mumbled, said more than he probably intended to. It was always the same unwavering crimson eyes. They haunted followed him into every room, lingered in the quietest parts of his mind. Especially when those same eyes were staring straight at him. It never stopped. Deku, you ready? Katsuki's voice cut through the air like a whip, the sudden sound coming from behind Izuku making him flinch. You have a real talent for sneaking up on people, Izuku muttered under his breath, too quiet for Katsuki to catch. Yeah. Just wrapping these, he added louder, gesturing to the cloth in his hands as he sat on the edge of the bed. Ever since he started fighting, really fighting, he'd taken to bandaging his arms. He didn't need it. No doctor told him to. But something about the ritual felt right. Like it grounded him before a job. Katsuki stepped closer, coming to a stop directly in front of him. And why the hell is it taking you so long? Izuku looked up, caught off guard by how close the other was standing. His stomach twisted with nerves, but not the kind he could explain. I dunno. Just, he trailed off, his voice softer now. Then, like it was nothing, he held out the cloth toward Katsuki. Can you do it for me? Katsuki stared at him for a moment. Silent. Scowling like usual, but not moving away. Then he took the cloth, grabbing Izuku's arm a little rougher than necessary, but his fingers adjusted, finding the right pressure. Wrapping the bandages around his forearm and hand with a focus that made Izuku's heart thud against his ribs. Katsuki didn't say anything. He just worked. His touch was coarse, calloused palms, fast movements, but there was care behind it. Something deliberate and almost gentle. Like instinct more than intention. There, Katsuki said, standing back. Put that hoodie on. The one from earlier. It's gonna be cold. Izuku couldn't help the grin tugging at his lips. You care about me? Like hell I do. Katsuki's reply was instant, annoyed. Don't overread it, nerd. He brushed past Izuku, their shoulders bumping electric and brief on the way out. Izuku didn't move. Just sat there, fingers flexing against the new bandages. It was always the eyes. The freckled male sighed, casting one last glance at himself in the mirror before stepping out of the room and trailing after Katsuki. It was nearing 8 p.m., and the whole crew was crammed into the same black, rusty van that rattled more than it roared. The interior smelled faintly of oil, cheap air freshener, and a trace of old smoke. Everyone was dressed in dark clothes, hoods up, gloves on, heads low. It was the kind of night where blending into shadows wasn't just a strategy, it was survival. Katsuki was behind the wheel, naturally. His hands gripped the steering wheel with quiet focus, crimson eyes locked on the road ahead like he was already halfway into the mission. His expression didn't waver. Izuku climbed into the passenger seat beside him, the warmth of the hoodie Katsuki told him to wear clinging to his skin. He hated to admit it, but the blonde had been right, it was freezing. His breath came out in puffs against the window as he watched the city blur past. You good? Katsuki muttered, barely glancing his way. Izuku gave a small nod. Yeah. Just thinking. That's what gets you in trouble. But there was no edge in his voice, only the familiarity of someone who's said it before and will probably say it again. Behind them, the crew was either hyping themselves up or zoning out in their own ways. Mina and Denki were whispering something that earned a snort from Zero. Kirishima was quiet, his face set with unshakable calm. Everyone had a role. Everyone knew what had to be done. The van hit a bump in the road, shaking slightly, and Izuku's hand braced against the side of the door. He glanced sideways at Katsuki, who seemed utterly unbothered by the chaos in the back or the weight of what they were heading toward. The docks were only a 20-minute drive away. And tonight, shipping Container 6B was waiting. All Izuku knew was that Container 6B held something dangerous, illegal contraband, likely a powerful new street drag that had already begun carving its way through the underground. It was expensive, addictive, and devastating. Aizawa didn't give them the full breakdown, just that it had to disappear. Tonight, a single fact rang clear in Izuku's mind. They couldn't let that container be sold or traded. Not if they gave a DMN about keeping the streets from falling further into chaos. And maybe it was reckless, maybe it was foolish, but Izuku felt alive. The adrenaline, the cold night air, the company of misfits he somehow belonged to, the fire that lit in Katsuki's eyes when it was time to act. Everything about this job, it was exhilarating. The van creaked to a stop a few blocks out. Everyone was in dark clothing. Hoods, gloves, black tape over any reflective gear. The moon was tucked behind thick clouds, a blessing. Katsuki killed the headlights and turned in his seat. You all remember what the hell you're doing, right? A round of nods. Silence. They didn't need to say it again. They moved on foot, slipping through the twisted hole in the old chain-link fence Kirishima had scoped earlier that week. Beyond that, shadows, steel, and silence. The docks were colder than expected, the kind of cold that seeped into your joints. Izuku pulled his hoodie tighter. In the distance, Container 6B. Parked at the end of the shipping yard, near the water. Floodlights buzzed lazily above, sweeping left to right every 30 seconds. 3 guards. One truck, idling. Denki and Siro broke off first. They slinked toward the maintenance shed near the electrical panel. A soft Z followed, and one floodlight blinked out with a flicker. Right on cue, one of the guards grunted and moved to investigate. The others tensed until a second surge popped from the other side. Mina's perfectly timed interference. Another guard peeled off. Just one left by 6B now. Katsuki's hand clapped Izuku's shoulder once. No words. Just go. Izuku dashed toward the parked truck, sticking low behind containers. He slipped into the open passenger door, slammed the guard's head into the dashboard, and yanked the keys. Silent. Meanwhile, Katsuki surged ahead, grabbing the last guard by the collar and slamming him against the side of the container. The man didn't even get a sound out before he crumpled. Kirishima jogged up, keeping watch as Katsuki cut the lock on the container. They opened the steel doors. Inside were rows of crates, tightly sealed. Aizawa had been right. Izuku pried one open with a crowbar, and there it was. Vacuum-sealed bags filled with a glittering, almost metallic blue powder. It shimmered in the dim light. Dangerous. Market-breaking. This stuff could end lives in weeks. Izuku stared at it for a second longer, jaw clenched. They couldn't let this reach the streets. It still didn't feel real, that this weight, this responsibility, rested on a bunch of criminals and street fighters like them. But here they were. And it was already too late to turn back. That was fun. Izuku managed, breath catching on the cold air, his voice light, even with adrenaline still coursing through him. His chest rose and fell steadily, the corner of his lip twitching upward into a crooked smile. His knuckles were sore, his body tense, yet he looked almost euphoric. Katsuki glanced at him from the side, scoffing as he ran a gloved hand through his hair. Maniac. Every diamante you prove my point. But there was no malice behind it, just a small, amused huff under his breath that might as well have been praise. Izuku rolled his eyes, nudging Katsuki's arm with his elbow. Leave me alone, he muttered, a playful edge in his voice. But his grin betrayed him. Behind them, Denki let out a laugh as he leaned against a stack of shipping pallets, his face lit up with post-job relief. You two argue like an old married couple, he teased, wiping sweat from his brow with his sleeve. Hey, I'm just glad nobody got shot tonight, Siro added with a crooked smirk, pulling off his mask. I like my limbs. And my blood inside of me. Same, Mina added, stretching with a groan. That rush though? Nothing like it. Izuku let his eyes wander the quiet yard, landing on the now-marked container. The whole thing had gone smoother than expected. Kirishima and Siro with the cameras, Denki killing the power, Katsuki doing what he did best, and Izuku fast, precise, and grounded. All right, break's over, Katsuki barked suddenly, the easy air vanishing as he pulled his gloves tighter. Let's get the container contents loaded onto the truck and wipe our prints. I want out of here in 10. Everyone snapped back into focus, moving quickly but efficiently. Izuku stayed behind for a second, looking up at the night sky, his breath visible in the cold. The job was risky, dangerous. But this feeling in his chest, racing heart, buzz in his veins, the weight of the moment, it was the kind of thing that made him feel alive. He turned, trailing behind the group, heart still hammering with something that wasn't just adrenaline. Fun, he thought. Katsuki had called him a maniac. But maybe he wasn't entirely wrong. Before leaving, Katsuki ducked under the rival gang's truck, securing a small charge, non-lethal, just fireworks and shrapnel. A warning. Zero rejoined them, tape already coiled around his arms. "They're coming back," he whispered. The crew moved fast, slipping back into the dark, back through the fence, into the waiting van. Katsuki started it on the first turn of the key. As they drove away, Izuku peeked out the back window. Boom. The truck lit up in a small blast of flame and smoke, tires shredded. Yelling erupted in the distance. No one followed. The time on the dashboard read 10:32 p.m. They were finally back. The van creaked to a stop outside the base, the engine ticking in the silence. As soon as the doors slid open, Mina practically fell out with a groan, dragging her feet toward the entrance. "I'm exhausted," she whined, tossing her hood back and stretching her arms high above her head. "Same," Kirishima muttered with a tired laugh as he followed, his shoulders slumped from the weight of the night. Denki and Zero trailed close behind, both too drained to offer anything more than grunts of agreement. The rush was gone now, left behind on the docks with the broken guards and scorched truck. All that was left was the aftermath, aching limbs, heavy eyes, and the quiet satisfaction of a job done right. Izuku stepped out last, his boots hitting the pavement with a dull thud. Katsuki came out right behind him, silent as ever. For a moment, neither of them moved, just stood there in the cold, letting the night settle. Izuku exhaled, the breath curling in the air. His knuckles still throbbed faintly beneath the wraps, but he didn't mind. If anything, it grounded him. He glanced sideways. Katsuki was watching him again, eyes unreadable under the dim light. Maybe checking for injuries. Maybe just thinking. Izuku couldn't tell. "You good?" Katsuki asked, low and gruff. Izuku blinked, then gave a small nod. "Yeah. You?" "Fine." And that was that. They walked in together, shoulder to shoulder, the only sound beneath them the quiet crunch of gravel. It wasn't awkward. The silence between them wasn't heavy, it was familiar. Comforting. The kind of quiet that didn't need to be filled. Kirishima held the front door open with the same tired smile he always wore after a long job. Izuku gave him a small nod of thanks as he passed through. Katsuki followed close behind, silent as ever. Upstairs, the others filtered off toward their rooms, the creak of old wood under their feet the only sound left in the house. Halfway up, Izuku felt fingers wrapped gently, but firmly, around his arm. Katsuki pulled him aside, just out of view, waiting until Kirishima disappeared behind his door before he finally spoke. "Are you going to stay, Deku?" he asked quietly. He stepped closer, and Izuku's back bumped gently against the railing. His breath caught, not out of fear, but from how close the blonde was. From the look in his eyes. Izuku hesitated. It had been days. Longer than he planned. He had to check in with Toshinori. Had to ground himself again. "I think my stay here's lasted longer than it should have," he said softly. Katsuki inhaled sharply through his nose. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes flickered. "All right," he said. "You gonna come back?" "I will," Izuku answered without hesitation. "I promise." Katsuki held his gaze for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. "I can walk you out." Izuku shook his head gently. "No. You're tired, Kaken. Go sleep." The way he said it, so soft, so sure, seemed to stop something in Katsuki's chest. For a split second, Izuku thought he imagined it, but he swore he saw Katsuki glance at his lips. Just for a moment. Then his eyes locked with Izuku's, a storm of unspoken words behind them. He bit the inside of his cheek. "Okay," he rasped. He stepped back. The space between them grew again, but not the distance. Not really. Katsuki turned and walked up the stairs, then stopped to look back at him. One last glance. One last second. Then he disappeared. Izuku stood there for a moment, frozen in place, before finally moving toward the front door. His hand hovered over the knob. He didn't want to leave. God, he didn't. He wanted to stay. With them. With him. But he couldn't. He couldn't get attached. Yet he already had. And deep down, Izuku knew, no matter how carefully he played this, it would all end horribly. Before calling Toshinori, Izuku made sure to put some distance between himself and the warehouse. He walked for a while, hands buried deep in his pockets, head bowed against the cold. The streets were quiet, painted silver under the flicker of passing streetlights. He kept going until the lights of the warehouse faded behind him and the sound of the city grew clearer. Distant engines, low chatter, the hum of life creeping back in. He stepped inside just long enough to grab a water and give his hands a chance to thaw. The moment he stepped back out, the cold hit harder than before, but at least now, he felt like he was far enough. Away from Katsuki. From the others. From the place that felt a little too much like home. Izuku pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over Toshinori's contact for a second before pressing call. It rang once. Twice. Then, Midoriya? Hey, Izuku said quietly, could you come pick me up? I'm on 8E near that family mart on the corner. There was a pause on the other end. A sigh. On my way, kid. The call ended. Izuku let out a breath. He didn't realize he'd been holding and leaned back against the store wall, eyes fixed on the dim sky above. He could still feel the ghost of Katsuki's hand on his arm, still see that look in his eyes. He shut his own, just for a moment, letting the night settle over him like a second skin. He didn't know what to do. It hurt more than he'd ever admit, to think about Katsuki in a way he shouldn't. Because despite everything, despite the moments, the laughter, the silent understanding between them, Izuku had one job. And that job was to kill him. Katsuki Bakugou. The feisty, cocky, relentless bastard he'd somehow gotten used to. The one who barked orders like he owned the world, who threw punches before words, but who also, somehow, made Izuku feel seen. That Katsuki, the one no one else really knew, had shown Izuku a side of himself that he never shared with anyone else. And Izuku, he didn't even realize. He was too blind to see the truth, how Katsuki actually liked being around him. How the blonde's heart stuttered every time Izuku smiled his way, how something unnameable flared in his chest every time Izuku said his name like it meant something. He didn't know the feeling Katsuki got when he called him Kaken, unaware of how fondly Katsuki looked at him. Didn't know the war that raged in his chest with every shared moment. But even if Izuku did know, he wouldn't act on it. Or maybe he couldn't. No one knew except him, not the loudmouth, not the tough guy with a fuse too short for feelings, but Katsuki Bakugou was a coward in his own way. ASLV to pride. He'd rather burn than let someone see him be soft. Especially Izuku. And maybe that's what made it all so tragic. That underneath the cursing and the fire, there was someone who cared. Someone Izuku was supposed to destroy. The sound of tires on wet asphalt made him look up. Toshinori's old, dented sedan pulled up to the curb. The headlights cut through the night, and the engine gave a soft grumble as it idled. The window rolled down halfway. Get in, kid. Izuku moved without a word, sliding into the passenger seat. The warmth from the heater seeped into his skin, but not deep enough to thaw what he was feeling. They drove off, silence settling between them like fog. The buildings blurred past, the city still alive and oblivious. So, learned anything? Toshinori's voice broke Izuku out of his thoughts. Yeah, I did. Izuku let out a sigh, eyes trailing up to the night sky through the window. Aizawa. He's the leader of Katsuki's gang. I think he's the one who tipped off the police, but I can't prove it yet. He's definitely on to me though. Toshinori just nodded, like he'd already figured as much, or at least expected it. It didn't surprise him. Nothing ever seemed to anymore. There's 5 of them, including Katsuki. Izuku's voice faltered for a split second. He almost said Kaken. His gaze flicked to Toshinori, but the older man's eyes were still focused on the road, calm and unreadable. I'd say those 5 are the best in their whole operation. Feels like Aizawa handpicked them for this job, this trip, or whatever he's calling it. Izuku paused. Those days at the warehouse, the jobs, the easy banter and late-night talks, it had almost made him forget why he was there in the first place. And remembering SCKD, it punched the breath out of him every single time. You're mumbling again, kid. Spit it out, Toshinori said, not unkindly, just familiar, like this was a habit of theirs. Right? They're all staying in a big warehouse. Not far from where you picked me up tonight. I've been on a couple jobs with them now. I think they trust me. Who's they? Toshinori asked, finally glancing over at him. Katsuki's crew. Mina, Siro, Kirishima, and Denki. They're normal even. You wouldn't think they're mixed up in this kind of stuff. But they're sharp. I wouldn't underestimate any of them. Especially not Katsuki. Interesting, Toshinori said. Anything else? Izuku thought for a second, then his eyes lit up. Oh, I got to interrogate a gang leader. It was actually pretty cool. We were stopping a trade between two rival crews, and we snagged one of them. For some reason, Aizawa let me handle the questioning. I don't know why, but it was fun. Intense, but fun. Toshinori glanced over again, and this time his expression softened. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, real, warm, and quiet. Toshinori? Izuku blinked. The light's green. Toshinori snapped back, pressing the gas. Sorry, I just haven't seen you that excited in a long time. Reminded me of when you were younger. Izuku stiffened slightly at the word younger. That version of him felt like a lifetime ago, naive, soft, foolish. Sorry, he muttered. Didn't mean to ramble like that. Don't apologize. I don't mind it, Midoriya. Izuku exhaled, leaning his head back against the window again, letting the hum of the car and the city lights lull his mind back to a quieter place. But even in that silence, even with his body finally relaxing, his mind didn't. Because every time he closed his eyes, all he saw was crimson. Unwavering. Untouchable. And far too dangerous to care about the way he did. 1 month. 1 entire month without him. Any last words? Izuku hissed, voice low, knife pressed tight against the man's neck. He could feel the guy's heartbeat right under the blade, fast, scared, pounding in panic. He didn't aim for the front of the throat. People in movies always went for that, but Izuku didn't. It was messy. He was smarter than that. The windpipe was tougher than it looked, rubbery, could throw the cut off and leave someone screaming. Izuku didn't need screaming. He needed silence. So instead, he adjusted the blade slightly, just enough to aim for the spot where the biggest artery ran, buried deep near the side of the neck. That's where the real damage happened. If you hit it right, it was over in seconds. You'll regret this. Izuku didn't answer. He struck. The knife went in clean, fast, just one sharp jab. The muscles gave way under the pressure, and before the man could react, Izuku dragged the blade sideways, slicing deep through skin and tissue. Not too high, not too low, just right. Right through where the blood pumped the fastest. Hot red sprayed across the alley, coating Izuku's arm. The man gasped once, wet, guttural, and then crumpled. His knees buckled like a puppet with its strings cut. Izuku caught his chest as he fell, easing him down quietly. Then silence. Just the sound of the body hitting the ground, heavy and final. Izuku didn't flinch. Didn't feel a thing. The man was a cop, one who poked his nose too far into something it shouldn't have. Besides, it was hard enough being discreet when his description was practically burned into every news site and police scanner in the city. Pale, green eyes, around 5 feet 8 inches, late teens to early 20s. Every officer knew the look by heart. He couldn't risk his face getting attached to it too. He'd already had one close call. Too close. Izuku ripped off his gloves and shoved them deep into his pocket. His fingers felt raw, sticky from where blood had leaked through. He wiped the blade clean on the inside of his jacket, swift, practiced, then sheathed it. Footsteps. Voices. 2 more men rounding the corner, their panicked shouts fast and clipped in Italian. The dead guy's backup. Time to go. He slipped into the shadows like a ghost, vaulting over a rusted gate and sprinting down the alley. His hood was already up. No one saw his face. But the jacket sheet. There was blood. A lot of it. Spatter on the sleeves, smeared across the front. He couldn't just toss it in a random trash bin. Someone would find it, trace it, sniff it out. He needed to be smart. Damn it, Izuku muttered under his breath as he slowed to a casual walk, trying to look normal. At the next corner, he slipped the jacket off and tied it around his waist. Not perfect, but it hid the worst of it. It would have to do. He blended into the crowd seamlessly, stepping into the busier part of the city. Neon signs, street food carts, the low hum of traffic and conversation filled the air. Tourists, late-night commuters, cops. And the cafe. Of course. He wasn't going to run into him. That wasn't how the world worked. Izuku hadn't seen Katsuki in over a month. Not a call answered, not a message returned. Not even a goodbye. He was on other jobs, collecting intel, fulfilling the missions Toshinori gave him. And Toshinori had said to let it rest for now. Let the dust settle. So, God, he missed him. Izuku told himself it was just guilt. Just the weight of unfinished business. But it wasn't. He missed the stupid smirks, the sharp edge in Katsuki's voice that somehow always softened around him. He missed the silence, the way it didn't feel like pressure with him. He missed the goddamn way Katsuki looked at him, like he knew him, even if Izuku didn't know what that meant. He knew why he'd stayed away. He knew the truth. He was catching feelings. Feelings he had no right to have. Because no matter how close they got, Izuku had one job. And it was to kill him. He barely had time to finish the thought before a hand snatched his arm and yanked him sideways into a narrow shop entrance. Hello. A police officer. Mid-30s. Stocky. Uniform slightly wrinkled. Izuku blinked up at him, forcing wide-eyed confusion onto his face. Hey, have I done something wrong, sir? The officer clicked his tongue. Don't play dumb. So, they were doing this. I'm not sure I know what you mean. I'm actually in a bit of a rush, my dad's expecting me. He's sick. He added just enough worry to his voice. Not too much. Realistic. The cop narrowed his eyes, scanning him head to toe. Izuku could feel the tension tighten around his ribs like wire. I'll be straight with you. You fit the profile of a guy we've been trying to track for weeks. Oh. Izuku furrowed his brow, let his expression crumple into nervous disbelief. A criminal? Sir, how would I possibly fit? 5'8". Athletic build. Usually in a hoodie with the hood pulled up. Face always covered. That's it? Still? After all this time? Izuku nearly laughed. Instead, he lowered his gaze, rubbed the back of his neck, and gave the man a tight, apologetic smile. I'm not trying to be rude, but sir, that's half the guys in this part of the city. You know that, right? Polite. From non-threatening. The officer exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Yeah, you're right. I've been staring at this DMN profile for hours. Guess I'm getting desperate. He stepped back, clearly second-guessing himself now. Go ahead, he said, waving a hand. Stay safe. Izuku gave a small nod and stepped back into the crowd. You too, officer. Once out of sight, he ducked into a corner between buildings and leaned against the wall, heart pounding. He tilted his head back, eyes closed. Too close. He'd hesitated, if he'd said the wrong word. One more second of suspicion and it would have been over. This life was getting harder to walk. Every lie stacked on the last. Every step forward pulled him closer to something he wasn't sure he could crawl back from. And still, his thoughts drifted to Katsuki. To the quiet between them. To the promise he hadn't kept. Welcome be it. The front door slammed hard, the sound echoing through the small apartment like a warning shot. Izuku stormed in, already ripping the bloody jacket from his waist and hurling it toward the corner. Ack. Toshinori finished weakly, eyes trailing after the garment. His gaze lingered on the streaks of red across the hem before shifting back to Izuku, who was already halfway down the hall. Midoriya, he sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Another one? Really? It wasn't my fault, Izuku muttered, shoving the bathroom door open. He got too curious. I had to get rid of him. Toshinori didn't say anything right away. Just another tired sigh, low and disappointed. The kind that sat heavy on the air even after it was gone. Inside the bathroom, Izuku braced himself over the sink. He emptied his pockets onto the counter, his pocket knife, stained dark at the edge, and a pair of crumpled gloves stiff with dried blood. Sheet, he whispered, staring at his reflection. What the hell is wrong with me lately? The man in the mirror looked nothing like the boy who once begged to make the world better. Messy hair clung to his forehead with sweat. Deep eye bags hollowed his eyes. His lips were dry and bitten raw. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. He didn't know how many people he'd killed this month. Didn't know if he wanted to count anymore. It hadn't been this bad since years ago, when things were darker, when he didn't feel anything at all. Izuku clenched his jaw and snatched the gloves, stuffing them deep into the trash bin beneath the sink like he could bury the act with them. Then he twisted the faucet on and splashed cold water on his face, once, twice, again and again, until the water ran down his collar and soaked into his shirt. It didn't help. He still felt wide awake and sick. Outside, Toshinori leaned against the wall. He didn't knock, but his voice came through the door, low and calm. "You've been sloppy." Izuku's breath hitched. He didn't reply. "I'm not scolding you. I'm worried about you." Izuku closed his eyes, gripping the sink tighter. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." The pause. "This isn't like you, Izuku. You used to only kill when you had to. Now it's every other day. What's going on?" Izuku bit the inside of his cheek. He couldn't tell him. Couldn't say I'm slipping because I'm thinking about someone I was sent to kill. Because if Toshinori found out, he wouldn't care why, only that Izuku was compromised. "Nothing's going on," he lied, too sharp, too fast. "Just tired." There was another long silence, and then, "All right, I'll give you tonight. But tomorrow we talk." His footsteps padded away. Izuku stayed where he was, dripping water onto the tiles, fists clenched on the sink. He couldn't keep this up. He knew it. But he also couldn't let go of him. Not yet. Izuku stared down at his phone, hands trembling, jaw tight. He couldn't bring himself to open the messages. Couldn't even look at the notifications without feeling like he might shatter. But leaving them unread didn't make them disappear. They just sat there, like bruises that refused to fade. Still, he couldn't answer. He shouldn't answer. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew what this was always supposed to be. So then, why did it hurt so damn much? All the walls he'd built, all the rules he swore to follow gone. Crumbling to dust, all because of him. Because of Katsuki. The stupid, cocky, egotistical blonde. But Katsuki wasn't stupid. He was. For letting it get this far. Izuku unlocked his phone anyway. 52 unread messages. 10 missed calls. All from the same name. Katsuki had stopped trying 2 weeks ago. Stopped calling, stopped hoping. Izuku didn't blame him. What was the point in reaching out to someone who was never going to answer? His thumb hovered over the screen, just for a moment. Then he locked it again, shoved the phone deep into his pocket like the whole thing disgusted him. He grabbed his knife, habitual now, comforting in a way nothing else was, and tucked it beside the phone. Another night. Another body, maybe. Another piece of him left behind in some dark alley. Maybe it was time for another, nightly stroll. At least out there, bleeding into the city shadows, he didn't have to think. Didn't have to feel. And if he crossed paths with someone who deserved to die, well, that would be convenient. It was pouring rain. Sheets of cold water lashed down from the sky, soaking the streets, flooding the gutters, turning everything into a blur of motion and sound. The storm didn't let up, didn't pause to breathe. Izuku didn't care. He pulled his hood up, the fabric already clinging to his soaked hair, and kept walking. Head down. Shoulders hunched. Eyes locked forward. The city around him pulsed with distant lights, red and gold from passing cars, flickering signs and shop windows, a few still open storefronts that cast a soft glow onto the wet pavement. He moved like a ghost through it all. Silent. Unseen. Untouchable. Every drop of rain felt like it was trying to drown the thoughts in his skull. Katsuki. His voice. That look he gave him before Izuku left. The questions he never answered. It would be so easy to disappear tonight. To fade into some alley, find a target, draw blood and silence in the same slide. That's what he did best, wasn't it? It was laughable, hilarious even. He was so pathetic. He stood at the base of the old metal staircase, rain dripping off his hood, pooling around his boots. The structure loomed above him, narrow, rust-slicked, zigzagging its way up the side of a 5-story building like a spine of old bones. The metal groaned under the weight of the storm, but it held. Just like he did. He took the first step. It creaked underfoot. His fingers curled around the wet railing, cold metal biting into his skin. He climbed quietly, eyes locked upward. The higher he got, the more the city unfolded behind him, blurry neon, wet streets, headlights crawling past like insects below. Each platform he passed brought more wind, more rain slashing sideways into his face. His soaked clothes clung to him, heavy and restrictive, but he moved like a shadow. Graceful. Efficient. Like he'd done this 1,000 times. He reached the third landing and paused, squatting against the railing to catch his breath, not from exhaustion, but from the weight in his chest. A few stories up, a flickering apartment window cast pale light across the stairwell. No one noticed him. No one ever did. Not when he didn't want to be seen. Izuku stood again and kept climbing, water splashing off his boots with every step. The city noise fell away, muffled by height and storm. It was almost peaceful up here, in the kind of way that felt just a little too quiet. By the time he reached the top, he was shaking, not from the cold, but from everything else. The silence, the ache, the knot in his chest he couldn't cut out. He stared down at the drop. The railing was waist-high. One slip, one choice, and it'd all be over. Yet he didn't care. The rain soaked through everything, his hoodie, his shirt, even the waistband of his jeans clinging damply to his skin. The wind bit at his face, slicing cold across his cheekbones. The roof wasn't that far up. Izuku crouched low beside the topmost platform of the stairs, gripping the ledge with slick fingers. His boots slipped once against the railing, but he adjusted. Calculated. Then he jumped. His hands latched onto the rooftop's edge, muscles tightening in his arms and shoulders as he hoisted himself upward. The strain felt good. Grounding. He grunted softly, dragging his chest over the concrete lip before rolling his weight onto solid ground. He lay there for a moment, back flat against the soaked rooftop, chest rising and falling. The sky above him roared. A flash of lightning cracked through the clouds like veins splitting open. Then he sat up, slowly. The city stretched endlessly below, grimy and beautiful in its chaos. Lights blinked and buzzed behind fogged windows. Horns honked somewhere in the distance. Life was moving on, unaware of him. Up here, it felt like time had stopped. Izuku pulled his knees close and rested his forearms across them. He wasn't sure how long he sat like that, just watching. Listening. Feeling. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, screen lighting up his soaked face. Still no new messages. But the ones from Katsuki were still there. 53 unread. 10 missed calls. A voice message from almost 3 weeks ago. Unopened. Untouched. He stared at the notification for a long time. Like he was waiting for something he knew wouldn't come. Izuku took a slow, shaky breath and let the screen dim again. Stupid. He was so painfully stupid. And then his phone lit up once more. Katsuki was calling. He let it ring. Twice. 3 times. And then he answered. He didn't know. Maybe part of him did. Izuku, Katsuki's voice came through the speaker, soft, quiet, barely more than a whisper. He didn't sound angry. Just tired. Maybe disappointed. Izuku didn't say anything. He flinched slightly just hearing his name in that voice, like it struck something raw in him. There was rain in the background on Katsuki's end too. Get down, idiot. His voice cracked, not with anger, but something more fragile. You don't even know where I am, Izuku whispered, almost defensively. I'm looking right at you, Katsuki replied, his voice steady now. Get down. Then the line went dead. Izuku didn't hesitate. He climbed down, still asking himself the same questions. What the hell was he doing? How did Katsuki even find him? Why had he answered the call? He already knew the answer. He just didn't want to face it. The drop was still a bit high. He landed hard, adjusting quickly, then looked around. No Katsuki. Until he felt a hand grab him and yank him back. Izuku spun around, heart in his throat. And there they were. Those unmistakable crimson eyes. The ones that never left his mind, not even for a day. Katsuki didn't look mad. Didn't even look hurt. He looked scared. "You're so goddamn stupid," he muttered, voice low, raw, and quiet as he pulled Izuku closer. "Did you know that?" Izuku couldn't speak. Couldn't move. He just stood there, his hoodie dripping with rain, his hands trembling at his sides. Katsuki's grip was firm, not angry, not rough, just grounding. Like if he let go, Izuku might vanish into the storm. Izuku's throat tightened. "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did," Katsuki interrupted quietly. "You meant to disappear. You meant to ignore me." Izuku's jaw clenched. He looked away, his voice a whisper. "I had to." "For what?" "For your job." Katsuki's voice cracked then, barely audible over the downpour. "Or because you got scared of me?" The silence that followed was deafening. Izuku swallowed hard. The rain slipped down his cheeks like tears he wouldn't let fall. "I'm not scared of you, Kaken." "No." Katsuki took a step closer, closing the gap between them. "Then why'd you run?" "I didn't run," Izuku breathed. "I just didn't want to drag you into something you didn't ask for." "I'm already in it, Themis," Katsuki snapped, though there was no heat in it. Only exhaustion. Only ache. "You think I didn't notice? You think I didn't care? I kept calling because I wanted to hear your voice, not because I wanted answers." Izuku finally looked at him. Really looked. His vision was blurry, whether from the rain or his eyes, he couldn't tell. "You shouldn't care about me, Kaken." "Well, I do." Katsuki's voice broke, barely above a whisper now. "And it's not something I can turn off just because you decided to vanish." That was it. That was the moment Izuku's composure cracked. He stepped forward, tentatively, like he was afraid Katsuki would back away. But he didn't. He stayed. Right there. Waiting. So Izuku leaned in, resting his forehead against the blonde's shoulder, trembling under the weight of everything he couldn't say. Katsuki didn't push him away. Instead, he wrapped his arms around Izuku, holding him tightly like he was trying to keep the whole demon world from taking him again. And for the first time in weeks, Izuku let himself breathe. A week of Izuku gone. It wasn't normal for Katsuki to act like this. And everyone noticed. He'd gone back to being his old self, short-fused, snappy, and bitter. The version of Katsuki they hadn't seen since before Izuku. Bakugou. Shut the hell up. His glare was sharp, voice sharper. Kirishima froze mid-step, lips parting as if to say something, but then pressing together again. His brows drew together, concern written all over his face. He didn't know why Katsuki had suddenly shut down, why he was acting like this again, but he didn't pry. He knew better then. So he did the only thing he could, gave Katsuki space, and waited. The others picked up on it too. No one said anything. They all just moved around him carefully, as if any wrong word might set him off. He didn't cook anymore, and when he did, it tasted like garbage. They knew what that meant. His cooking only fell apart when he did. He stayed locked in his room most days, only coming out for jobs or meetings that had to be handled. The light in him had dimmed, like someone flipped a switch and Katsuki Bakugou went back to black and white. Kirishima hated seeing him like this. But he'd been here before. He knew forcing anything out of him wouldn't work. Katsuki always came to him in the end. Boys. Second week of Izuku gone. Damn it. Katsuki bit down on his lip, hard, eyes glued to his phone screen. 7 missed calls. Dozens of texts. All unanswered. For the first time in his life, he didn't know what the hell to do. Didn't know what to think. Why was the demon nerd ignoring him? He racked his brain for a reason, any reason. There's no way he did something wrong. No way. Izuku promised he'd come back. So why the silence? Katsuki's jaw clenched as he hurled the phone onto his bed. Effing hell. A shaky breath slipped past his lips as he dragged a hand through his hair, tugging at the strands in frustration. He hated this, hated how much he cared. Hated how raw he felt when it came to Izuku. Like all his armor had been ripped off without warning. His gaze fell to the phone again, screen dark, but the weight of what it held made his chest ache. He couldn't even bring himself to listen to the voicemail he left. Didn't need to. He remembered every DMN word. His voice was rough, strained, like he'd been holding back too much for too long. Hey! A beat of silence, heavy with frustration. I don't know why the F you're ignoring me. I don't know if I did something, if you're in trouble, or what the hell is going on. His breath hitched, and for a moment, the bravado cracked. The next words came quieter, shakier. Just please. Answer me. Another pause. You could hear it, how much it took for him to admit the rest. There's something seriously wrong with me. I haven't even known you that long, but damn it. His voice dropped, soft and raw, like it physically hurt to say it. I miss you. Then silence. He didn't hang up right away. Just let it linger a few seconds, as if maybe, somehow, Izuku would still pick up. How embarrassing. To think he used to roll his eyes at all that sappy, lovey-dovey bullshit, called it weak, pathetic. And now? He was officially one stupid motherfucker in love. He hated it. God, he hated admitting it. But it was so painfully obvious. Why else would he be practically aching for the nerd to text back? Why else would he catch himself replaying the sweetness of his laugh? To see his frustratingly cute smile, or the way, Kaken, slipped off his tongue like it belonged there, like it meant something? There was something deeply, irreversibly wrong with him. Because all he wanted, desperately, shamefully, was to see him again. A loud bang echoed against Kirishima's door. It was 2 a.m. What the hell? Kirishima groaned groggily, rubbing his eyes as he shuffled over. When he opened the door, he blinked in surprise. Bakugou? What are you doing up so? The blonde stood there, hands stuffed in his pockets, eyes shadowed with something between exhaustion and frustration. I'm such a goddamn sap. Kirishima's sleep-fogged mind nearly short-circuited. Holy shit. Was this it? Was he finally admitting it? Was he actually about to talk about his feelings for Izuku? He had to be dreaming. Come in, bro, Kirishima said, stepping aside quickly. Talk to me. Katsuki walked in without a word, slumping down onto the edge of the bed like he carried something too heavy to keep standing with. Kirishima sat next to him, watching as he stared blankly at the floor, completely still, but clearly not at peace. The redhead waited a beat, then spoke gently. You been, seriously off. Everyone's noticed. I'm worried about you. You haven't been like this since. Katsuki's jaw tensed, his whole posture stiffening. He knew exactly what Kirishima was referring to. I know. He took a shaky breath. Was it that obvious? Kirishima nodded slowly. Yeah. There was no point dancing around it. It was about Izuku. Of course it was. I don't know why I've been so miserable. Katsuki clenched his fists. Sheet. I do know why. I just It wasn't easy for him. Kirishima knew that. Vulnerability never came naturally to Katsuki, it was always like pulling teeth. You love him, huh? The words hit the air with a quiet finality. Katsuki huffed. Yeah, he muttered. I do. There's nothing wrong with that man, Kirishima said, voice soft. Honestly? We all saw it coming. It was just a matter of time. Katsuki let out a dry chuckle, not because it was funny, but because it was so goddamn ironic. It's been 2 weeks. His description's all over the DMN news. Kirishima blinked. Wait, what? The news? Yeah. Probably a criminal now. Katsuki sighed, eyes dark. He's on a goddamn killing spree. Go figure. Kirishima didn't respond right away. He could tell there was more, something Katsuki hadn't said yet. It was in the way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes stayed fixed on the floor like he was afraid of what might come out if he looked up. He was holding something in. But Kirishima didn't push. Over a month of Izuku gone. Katsuki had stopped calling. Stopped trying. He was a wreck, there was no denying it. What are we going to do about this? About him? Mina's voice was low, edged with frustration as she glanced toward the closed door of Katsuki's room. Kirishima sighed, dragging a hand down his face. I don't know. He's a mess. It hurts seeing him like this. The group nodded in quiet agreement. Kirishima hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor, torn. He told me something a few weeks ago. What was it? Kaminari asked, brows furrowed. The redhead hesitated again. He didn't want to betray Katsuki's trust, but something told him they needed to hear it. And, honestly, it wouldn't shock any of them. He admitted it. His feelings for Izuku. His voice was soft, like he was still processing the weight of it. Wasn't exactly a surprise, but he finally said it out loud. Mixed expressions settled over the group, some wide-eyed, others unsurprised. That same, figured, look passed between them all. I just hope Izuku has a good reason for not being here, Mina said, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. He doesn't seem like the type to disappear and never come back. Especially when it comes to Bakugou. Yeah. Hopefully, Shiro murmured, biting his lip. Kaminari narrowed his eyes. What do you mean, hopefully? Shiro hesitated, then drew in a slow breath. I mean, Izuku's always seemed like a good guy. Moral. But what if we never really knew him like we thought we did? Maybe we missed something. The room went silent. That's just a theory, he added quickly, sensing their unease. Probably nothing. I mean, if Bakugou trusts him, then, so should we. Kirishima nodded slowly, but his stomach twisted. He hadn't told them everything. He hadn't mentioned the killing spree. Did he even want to? Because if they knew, Shiro might not be wrong. Katsuki let out a heavy sigh as he turned away from the door. He'd heard everything. The moment his name was mentioned, he'd been there, silent, back pressed to the door, listening like a ghost on the other side. He probably shouldn't have. Honestly, he wished he hadn't. Shiro's words repeated over and over in his head like an unwanted mantra. Maybe we don't really know him. And maybe they didn't. Maybe he didn't. The thought dug deep, sharp, cruel. Because Katsuki loved him. God, he FING loved him. And it SCKD. It SCKD to care about someone who left without a word. It SCKD to miss someone who might never have been his to begin with. Katsuki dragged a hand through his hair, nails digging into his scalp as he paced his room, teeth clenched. They don't know him like I do, he wanted to say. But even that felt weak now. Uncertain. Because what if they were right? What if all those stolen glances, quiet laughs, late-night talks, what if they meant more to him than they ever did to Izuku? What if it was just easier to disappear than to admit it? Katsuki leaned against the wall, breathing slowly, grounding himself. No matter what, no matter the silence, the confusion, the anger, his heart wouldn't stop aching for him. And that was the worst part of all. He needed air, he needed out. Katsuki couldn't take it anymore. The walls were closing in, the voices in his head screaming louder than the ones downstairs. Without a word, he yanked a hoodie over his head, shoved his feet into the nearest pair of shoes, and stormed out of his room. The others watched from the staircase, frozen mid-conversation as he passed them by. He didn't care. Not even a glance their way. That's all that mattered. The rain was relentless, crashing down like it had something personal against him. Cold, but unforgiving. He hated the rain. But tonight? He welcomed it. Let it drown everything out. He didn't know how far he walked, how long he kept his eyes on the soaked pavement beneath him, boots splashing through puddles as his thoughts spiraled. Everything hurt. Everything was loud. Every breath was one too many. Katsuki, you dumb FING idiot. Over and over again. He came to a stop. A building. Old, tall, 5 stories of crumbling brick and rusted rails. It loomed over him like it had been waiting. Why was he drawn to it? He didn't know. But then, his eyes rose to the roof. There was someone up there. A shadowed figure, standing still against the gray, blurred sky. The rain distorted everything, but Katsuki knew. It couldn't be. What was? His heart slammed against his ribs as his hand shot into his pocket, fishing out his phone with trembling fingers. He dialed the number he knew better than his own. Frank. Twice. 3 times. Each second stretched on like a lifetime, each tone another jagged beat against his chest. It stopped ringing. He was answered. Izuku. The name left his mouth softer than he intended, barely a whisper. It was all he could manage. Not anger, not frustration, just exhaustion. Disappointment. In himself, mostly. The rain crackled around him through the phone, mixing with the pounding in his chest. His eyes were locked on the rooftop above, on the silhouette standing there in the downpour like some kind of ghost. A ghost he'd spent 2 agonizing weeks chasing, before giving up. There was no response on the other end. No words, not even a breath. But Katsuki knew Izuku was there, hearing him. He flinched just seeing that figure shift slightly. God, he could feel it. Izuku felt something too. He closed his eyes for half a second, voice cracking despite himself. Get down, idiot. He didn't yell it. Couldn't. Not like before. Not this time. His throat was too tight with something unspoken, fear, maybe. Guilt. You, Izuku's voice came through hesitant. Defensive even. You don't even know where I am? Katsuki opened his eyes again, rain dripping from his lashes. He stared harder at the figure on the roof. I'm looking right at you. His voice didn't shake that time. It was steady, even if everything else inside him wasn't. Get down. He hung up. His hand fell to his side, fingers still wrapped around the phone, and he exhaled slowly. Please, Izuku, just listen this once, Katsuki thought, biting down on his lips so hard it should have hurt, but it didn't. Not compared to this. His chest ached with something sharp and relentless, but all his mind could focus on were those dim and emerald eyes, the way they looked at him like he mattered. That stupidly soft, annoyingly adorable smile that always made his heart skip a beat, no matter how hard he tried to play it off. The freckles, God, those freckles, splattered like constellations across his cheeks. He used to think they were distracting. All he wanted was to see him again. But what if he didn't come down? What if he turned away and vanished again? Katsuki didn't think he could handle that. Not after everything. Not after all the silence, the night spent staring at his phone, wondering if he should have said something different. Done something better. He clenched his jaw. Every thought was coming at him like a bullet, fast, sharp, unforgiving. Come on, damn it. Jump down. Let me yell at you. Let me punch your shoulder and call you a dumbass and act like everything's fine when it's not. Just come back. Katsuki didn't even realize Izuku had already jumped down the last set of stairs, his boots hitting the pavement with a sharp splash. He didn't see the blonde at first, his eyes flicked left and right, scanning the shadows, chest rising with each shallow breath. Then, without thinking, Katsuki surged forward and grabbed his arm, yanking him back with a force he didn't even realize he was holding onto. Izuku stumbled, caught off guard, but quickly turned eyes wide, startled, breath hitching the moment he recognized who it was. And then those eyes met his. Those eyes, green and wild and way too dim and familiar. Those eyes. They never left his mind. Not even once. Not when he forced himself to sleep. Not when he laid awake wondering what the hell he did wrong. Not even when he started to convince himself maybe Izuku was just gone. And now here he was. Katsuki didn't know what he was supposed to feel. Anger? Relief? Desperation? Maybe all three. But when his eyes met Izuku's trembling form, he didn't feel any of that. He just felt scared. You're so goddamn stupid, Katsuki muttered, his voice low and cracked. He pulled Izuku closer, not in rage, but to make sure he was real. Did you know that? Izuku didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stood there, drenched and trembling, like a ghost trying to remember how to be alive. Katsuki didn't let go. His grip wasn't rough. Wasn't angry. Just steady. Grounding. Like if he didn't hold on, Izuku would slip through his fingers again and vanish into the rain. Izuku started, voice hoarse. I didn't mean to. Yes, you did. Katsuki's voice stayed quiet, but the words cut deep. You meant to disappear. You meant to ignore me. Izuku turned his head away. Katsuki saw the tension in his jaw. I had to. For what? For your job. Katsuki's throat tightened. He felt his voice crack, barely audible over the rain. Or because you got scared of me? Silence. That same demon silence that had been echoing in his ears for weeks. I'm not scared of you, Kaken. Katsuki stepped forward. No. His voice was low. Measured. Then why'd you run? I didn't run, Izuku said. I just Didn't want to drag you into something you didn't ask for. I'm already in it, thus, Katsuki said, his voice strained. You think I didn't notice? You think I didn't care? I kept calling because I wanted to hear your voice, not because I wanted answers. Izuku finally looked up, and Katsuki swore he saw everything crack behind those eyes. You shouldn't care about me, Kaken. Katsuki let out a quiet, bitter laugh. Not because it was funny. Because it was stupid. Because it was too late. Well, I do. His voice broke again, low, close to a whisper. And it's not something I can turn off just because you decided to vanish. And then, finally, Izuku moved. Just a little. One step. Katsuki didn't move. Izuku came closer, slow and unsure, like he didn't believe Katsuki would let him. Like he thought he'd be shoved away. But he didn't. He never would. Izuku leaned in, resting his forehead against Katsuki's shoulder, and he was shaking. Like he'd been holding himself together with wires and tape this whole time. Katsuki didn't push him away. Instead, he wrapped his arms around him, tight, close, like he could hold back the rain, or the world, or whatever the hell kept trying to take Izuku from him. They stood like that for a while, just the two of them, drenched in pouring rain, the world around them muffled by the downpour. Eventually, Katsuki pulled back, only enough to move his hands, shifting them gently to Izuku's face, his thumbs brushing against the sides of his jaw as he studied him. You haven't been sleeping, Izuku, he muttered, brows furrowing. You look like hell. Miserable. Izuku stared at him, dazed. It took him a second to even register that Katsuki was holding his face. When did you start calling me that? Katsuki scoffed softly. That's what you're worried about right now? A flush crept up Izuku's cheeks. He quickly looked away. Sorry. Don't apologize, Katsuki said quietly before letting his hands fall. The absence of his touch made the cold rain feel sharper. Izuku stayed silent, unsure what to say, what he even could say. Then, Katsuki spoke again, voice barely above the sound of the rain. He missed you. Izuku blinked, stunned. You missed me? His voice cracked just a little when he said it. Like he didn't believe he was worth missing. Never mind. I take it back. Why missed you too, Kaken? Izuku sputtered. It slipped out before he could think. Raw, honest, shaking at the edges like his breath. His hands clenched at his sides, unsure of what to do with them. He wasn't even looking at Katsuki, too afraid of what he might see on his face. Disgust? Pity? Regret? But all Katsuki did was exhale, the tension in his shoulders finally dropping just a little. Took you long enough to say it? He muttered, but his voice was low. Gentle. Barely holding back everything behind it. I wanted to, Izuku murmured. Every time I looked at my phone. Every time I didn't pick up I wanted to say it. You should've. Katsuki's voice cracked, chest tight. I needed to hear it. I know. Izuku shut his eyes, guilt twisting through his gut. I was scared if I said it I wouldn't be able to stay away. Katsuki didn't answer right away. He just stood there, staring at him, rain soaking through his hoodie, fists clenched at his sides. He didn't know what to say. What the hell could he say? That he understood? That he forgave him? That he didn't still ache from every unanswered call, every ghosted message? I didn't want to hurt you, Izuku whispered, finally lifting his eyes to meet Katsuki's. I thought if I stayed away, you'd stop caring. That it'd be easier for you. Katsuki's jaw clenched at that, his expression shifting like he was holding something in, something big. His hands twitched at his sides, aching to do something, grab him, shake him, pull him in, but he held back. Barely. Easier, he echoed, voice low and hoarse. You think watching the person he cut himself off with a breath, chest rising sharply. You think watching you disappear was easy? Izuku's lips parted, but no sound came out. You didn't even give me the choice, damn it. Katsuki's eyes burned into him, rainwater, or maybe something else, dripping from his lashes. You just decided what would hurt less. For you. Izuku opened his mouth again, but Katsuki stepped forward, crowding into his space with a kind of desperation in his presence that Izuku had never seen so bare before. I would have chosen the pain, he said, trembling now. If it meant I got to know. Got to be there. I would have taken it all. Every fucking part of it. Izuku's breath hitched. I'm sorry, he said again, broken and small. I didn't mean to. I know you didn't. Katsuki's voice softened, though his hands were still fists. But you still did. And now I don't know what to do with all this. Shit, I feel, 'cause I kept holding on to something that kept slipping further away. He finally let his hands unclench, reached up slowly, and then, as if afraid Izuku might vanish if he didn't touch him, Katsuki cupped his face again, brushing rain and wet curls from his skin. But you're here, he breathed. You're actually here. So say it again. Izuku blinked, stunned. Katsuki's thumb grazed his cheek. Tell me you missed me. Say it like you mean it. And Izuku, with no hesitation this time, leaned into the warmth of his touch and whispered, I missed you, Kaken. I missed you. A shaky breath escaped him, so much. For once in his life, Katsuki felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel before, like he belonged. Like this was exactly where he was meant to be. Right here. With Izuku. Without thinking, without hesitation, Katsuki leaned in. His heart hammered so loudly he was sure Izuku could hear it. Their breaths mingled in the damp air, heavy and charged, as Katsuki closed the small space between them. Izuku's eyes fluttered shut, lips parting just slightly. When their mouths finally met, it was slow and searching, a tentative question spoken in silence. Katsuki's lips pressed firmly against Izuku's, hungry yet gentle, as if trying to memorize every moment, every feeling. Izuku responded immediately, his hands clutching at Katsuki's jacket, pulling him closer like he was afraid to let go. The kiss deepened, messy and raw, full of every unsaid word and every aching feeling that had been building between them. Outside, the rain kept falling, but in that moment, nothing else existed. Just the warmth spreading through Katsuki's chest, and the quiet promise held in their shared breath. For the first time in forever, Katsuki felt whole.